know it's this. It's like a perk in the talk of this shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion new single, my hater, the big better put on the road, I just spit. I know we got $1 million, the devil, that shit ain't not cheaper than
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. Here we present you different world stories and adaptations. This is the 7th part of What If Saitama Enters Dragon Ball God's Arena. Smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. I am a Super Saiyan. Now prepare to burn in hell. A swirl of confusion, rage, and shock rocked Vegeta. The Prince of Saiyans refused to believe what he was seeing. Nappa, a Super Saiyan. Vegeta simply couldn't understand it. Now, there was no doubt that Nappa was of the higher echelon of the Saiyan race, and given his status as the general of the Saiyan army, he would have eventually attained the transformation, but that would only be after the prince himself attained it first. The idea that a gibbering, hot-headed fool like Nappa could attain the legendary Super Saiyan transformation before he did was inconceivable. NOOO. Everyone looked up to the sky when they heard Vegeta's scream echo through the land. The prince was so engulfed in rage, it actually manifested around him in a purple aura, and his face was so angry, one could hardly even tell it was human. The veins in his eyes turned red, the hairs on his tail pointing out, and his fists clenched in fury. I refuse to accept this. I am the culmination of everything superior in the Saiyan race. Nappa, you are nothing but a worm compared to M. Vegeta's sentence was abruptly cut off, for he felt like a cannonball had shot itself straight into Vegeta's stomach. It wasn't a cannonball, but in fact, it was Nappa's fist that had barreled itself into Vegeta's stomach. A cannonball would have been preferable. The Saiyan general was so fast, not even Captain Ginyu himself saw him clearly. The red veins in Vegeta's eyes bulged to even larger sizes, as lines of drool streaming down Vegeta's face. This pain was like nothing he had ever experienced. What in the? Nappa said nothing to Prince Vegeta. No snide comments, no condescending jokes, no snarls or anger, just a neutral face. It was as if Nappa was reminiscing of the moments in Vegeta's life, what he had done, and how well did he honor his Saiyan ancestry. After about 10 seconds, the Saiyan general bent his head down and whispered something into Vegeta's ear that would forever change the Prince of Saiyans. Your father would be so disappointed in the man you've become. With a light push from Nappa's fingers, Vegeta was sent on a free fall, his body and his mind broken yet again by another earth-shattering defeat. Is somebody gonna get him? Said Recoome. Nobody made any movement to save the prince from falling. Fine, I'll do it. Only at the last moment, when Vegeta's face was almost inches away from the ground, that Guldo lifted his finger, telekinetically saving Vegeta from a broken nose. Guldo lifted his finger further up into the air, bringing Vegeta up and laying him down on the edge of the ship. Zarbon floated beside Vegeta and put his fingers to his neck for a pulse. Well, he's still breathing. He's just knocked out. Well, I'm not putting him in a healing pod, shouted Guldo. Recoome, you do it. Recoome grunted in annoyance, replying, fine. Recoome will take all Veggie inside. Recoome slowly flew over to Vegeta's side and slung him over his shoulder, making his way toward the healing quarters. Frieza had turned around to see what Nappa has done to Vegeta, but when he turned around, Nappa was gone. I'm right here. Frieza's head spun back around to meet Nappa's golden eyes, glowing with the power and rage of a Super Saiyan. Frieza's tongue was tied in knots. How could a Saiyan obtain such speed? You have no idea what you're up against, shouted Nappa. Frieza's eyes widened, and he rapidly put his arms up to block the blow that struck him. Even when he defended himself, a surge of energy sent him flying up into the sky. Several bursts of wind pressure released in the process, 10 times more powerful than any other previous bursts of air, destroying the cliffs off of many canyons nearby. Nappa followed up his attack and flew up into the air, pummeling Frieza with a barrage of punches. Frieza attempted to retaliate, but Frieza couldn't keep up with Nappa's new Super Saiyan speed. The golden aura began to increase in intensity, creeping up onto Frieza's arms and quickly enveloping both warriors. After several punches, Frieza finally managed to catch his fist. Nappa's eyebrows furrowed, and he threw a fist with his other hand. Frieza caught the second fist as well, and the two of them proceeded to push each other midair. Frieza's aura began to shine around him, combining with Nappa's energy to create a swirling vortex of colored Kai. Frieza's mouth was pursed into a downward snarl of rage, incapable of understanding how Nappa gained such an unbelievable boost in strength. Frieza began to feel the pressure in his wrists increase, the aura and dominance of Nappa gradually overwhelming Frieza by the second. The Saiyan general applied just a minuscule increase in force, which was enough to send jolts of pain through Frieza's body and caused him to let out a scream of pain. Insolent monkey. Nappa slapped Frieza across the face and followed up with a right front kick to his chin that propelled him upward. Nappa flew up above him and for the finishing touch, slammed Frieza downward with a knee to the stomach. Both Frieza and Nappa crashed down to the earth at amazing speeds, kicking up huge clouds of dust when they reached the ground. The dust quickly cleared, and the spectators saw Nappa holding Frieza by the neck, the golden energy still burning brightly around him. Nappa scoffed. "Come on, don't tell me that this is the best you can do," shouted Nappa. "I haven't even broken a sweat." Nappa opened his palm, firing a burst of yellow energy that sent Frieza rocketing through the earth, creating a canyon that spanned several hundred meters wide and several hundred meters deep, stupefying all of the spectators. "I want the honor of taking you down at your best. I owe it to all of the Saiyans who died by your hand." Nappa spread out his legs, reached his arms out, and from his palms, fired lightning-fast bullets of energy. Frieza raised himself off the ground, shaking off the trauma of the blast, and quickly raised his arms to defend himself from the onslaught of bullets about to strike him. It felt as if dozens upon dozens of bees were swarming him, stinging him, pestering him to no end. As the seconds passed, the multitude and power of the bullets increased. For the final touch, Nappa launched an energy bullet the size of a soccer ball. The energy ball exploded upon contact, enveloping him in a cloud of smoke. GGGRRRHHH. The energy from Frieza disseminated the cloud of smoke. The Saiyan general smirked. It looked like he managed to get a rise out of him. "I must concede, I hadn't expected such a grandiose display of vigor from a creature so low on the food chain," shouted Frieza. "But alas, a monkey is still a monkey, and I've killed plenty in my day. Million, literally millions." Nappa's aura flared up. "So if you think that now you're a Super Saiyan, you're better than me, Lord Frieza." Frieza enunciated the word Lord as he spoke. "Then you're dead wrong. Nobody humiliates me," and walks away. Rocks that laid around Frieza floated up in the sky, and the ground around him began to violently shake. Nappa's senses spiked. Somehow, he was making himself even stronger. His body tensed. Maybe this wasn't going to be as easy as he thought. His thought was instantly proven correct. Frieza flew up toward Nappa at a speed much faster than just a few seconds ago. Nappa barely had time to block the punch and return fire with a counter-punch. The two of them flew to the skies and struck each other with powerful knee strikes. Both of them instantly disappeared from the spectators' line of sight, with the only visible sign that a battle was even taking place being the intensely sharp bursts of air pressure that managed to actually ruffle up some of the spectators, specifically King. Speaking of King, the world's strongest man, the hero had his eyes closed and his hands clasped together, quietly sending prayers to the god up above who kept on saving his ass time and time again. He really didn't deserve it, but he still appreciated it nonetheless. Hold on. A small stream of some odd liquid stuck itself to his pants. It took a few seconds to realize what that odd liquid really was, and as soon as he did, he slapped his hand to his forehead. Of course, well, what was a pair of ruined pants in comparison to one's life? Once the feeling of embarrassment faded, King focused his attention to other matters at hand. All of the heroes were lying unconscious in the middle of the battlefield. If this battle continued to heat up, the heroes could be turned into collateral damage. Well, I haven't done shit for dick since I got here, so. Despite the fear welling up in his heart, a combination of both bravery and guilt overpowered this primeval fear. He'd lived this life for more than 3 years now, and because of it, not only did he steal the credit from an honest man, but had also put innocent civilians in harm's way countless times simply for being the world's strongest man. "It's about God am I grow a pair to replace the womanhood in between my legs," mumbled King. The hero took a deep breath and sprinted into the heat of the battle. King covered his face with his hands to avoid any more scars, and had to do whatever he could to make sure he wasn't blown away from the bursts of wind. The first person King grabbed was, ironically, the hero hunter, Garu. King grunted. Garu was a lot heavier than he thought. Either that, or King was really weak. It's probably the latter. The hero slung Garu around his shoulders and ran, or more specifically, trotted, as fast as he could back to a location far enough from the battleground. Phew. King swiped the sweat off his forehead. He only carried one body, and already he was sweating like a pig. I really need to work out. Taking another deep breath, he ran into the hellfire of battle, determined to do whatever he could to help. Up in the sky, the battle raged on with unbridled ferocity. Unlike a few moments ago, Frieza was able to hold his own against Super Saiyan Nappa, proving that his recent power-up wasn't just for show. No, the fight between the Super Saiyan of Legend and the Emperor of the Universe had only just begun. Nappa and Frieza were exchanging several close-range blows, neither one of them giving the other a single inch. Frieza jabbed Nappa, and Nappa blocked the punch with his elbow. An onslaught of quick jabs followed, and Nappa attempted to block them just as he did before, but with little success. Frieza attacked Nappa with a knee strike, sending him crashing down to the cliffside. Frieza's hands clamped Nappa's face and neck, preventing him from speaking. Two pink energy balls formed at the palms of Frieza's hands. The energy balls enveloped around Nappa. Frieza continued the relentless assault with a barrage of pink energy waves, creating a large explosion with Nappa in the center of it. Frieza floated above the barren crater, his arms crossed in confidence and his lips pursed into a small smile. I know you're still out there, so don't waste any time playing dead. The dust from the explosion swirled around in a tornado-like fashion, combining with the aura of the Super Saiyan Nappa to create a light brown and yellow vortex. All the nearby rocks were destroyed, and in the center of the vortex, Nappa shot back up, surprising Frieza, and punched Frieza hard in the chin. Nappa rotated his body midair in order to gain momentum in his spin kick, successfully hitting Frieza and sending him flying to the right. Nappa blazed forward at full speed, performed a forward front flip, and kicked Frieza downward. Before Frieza crashed down to the ground again, his Kai flared around him, flying back up to Nappa. Nappa threw a yellow orb of energy down, but Frieza knocked it aside and swung a left fist, to which Nappa met with his own fist. Both warriors struggled midair, both of them trying to gain the edge over the other. Now this is more like it, said Nappa through grunts. Oh, you think so? Replied Frieza. Well, I hope it's everything you wanted. The aura around Frieza brightened again, and Nappa felt an intense pressure creeping up as Frieza's energy began to rise. But enough playtime. Come and get the first real fight you've had in 20 years, you filthy monkey. Slimy reptile. Both of their auras burst around their bodies. The energy from their bodies swirled around them, expanding in size to form giant torrential whirlpools in the sky, all the while their voices beginning to rise in intensity. The whirlpools of energy continued to grow and grow, becoming more intense as they increased in size. When the two energies had gained enough mass, they eventually touched each other. A series of sparks and sizzles filled the air when the two of them met, each orb of energy fluctuating in the epicenter of this spherical struggle. Unbelievable, muttered Captain Ginyu. This is the power of a Super Saiyan. Captain Ginyu looked down and realized a current of wind was whipping up. It took him a second to figure out this sudden windstorm was being caused by Frieza and Nappa's energy collision. The winds were brewing at such fast velocity. Large rocks and leftover debris from previous battles were being lifted up into the air. All of the wind currents and debris were being sucked into the epicenter of the clash of energies, instantly being vaporized upon contact. Soon after, the auras began to die down, regressing back to fiery flames wrapping around the two fighters with their warmth. But neither one made a move. Both warriors merely stared each other down, the intensity of the battle being played out with only looks. Contrary to their passionate gazes, their bodies were sedate and tranquil, not even a finger twitching out of place. Frieza and Nappa calmly floated downward to the ground. The pair walked toward each other until they were inches apart. Standing so close to each other, the spectators noticed that even in his second form, Nappa was still a few inches taller and his muscles more defined thanks to the Super Saiyan power surging through his veins. Not a single sound was released from their vocal cords. The only thing that could be heard was the sound of wind and the silent stutters of shock from some of the spectators. After the intense moment of silence, it was Nappa who put it to rest. Nappa smirked. He swung his fist, slapping Frieza across the face and putting him off balance. Up next came an elbow to Frieza's face, and then a right fist planted in the lizard's gut. Frieza retaliated by sticking his palm out onto the ground, spun 360 degrees like a spinning top, and swept Nappa's feet. However, Nappa anticipated the move and jumped up into the air, firing a small burst of energy at Frieza. Frieza followed Nappa's move and flew up into the sky, narrowly dodging the blast of energy. Frieza cupped his hands together, gathered the energy from his body, and blasted a purple energy wave. Nappa braced himself by craning his right arm back. That won't work on me, the Saiyan general yelled out, and when the energy wave was just about to hit him, Nappa deflected it with his hand. No, but this will. Appearing right behind the energy wave, Frieza honed in on his kill while he was distracted with the two balls of energy he had gathered in his palms. Nappa wasn't fast enough to evade Frieza at such a short distance, so he was forced to take the brunt of the energy balls. Nappa was hurtled up into the sky, When he stopped, he shook his head to shake off the trauma and glared down at Frieza. I've had enough of this. Time for you to pay, Frieza. Nappa opened up his lower jaw and prepared his signature attack. Even now, he couldn't believe how much energy he had gained. The kai flowing up his body and through his throat was unbelievable. Frieza tensed. Nappa must have been preparing one of his signature attacks. Not a chance, shouted Frieza. Frieza held his palm up in the air, and a purple orb of energy appeared in his hand the size of a bowling ball. A second later, it became the size of an exercise ball, and the next second, it was as big as a wrecking ball. Instead of firing the ball, a beam of energy fired out of the orb. Super Breaker Cannon. The full brunt of these pulverizing blasts sparkled and sizzled in the sky. Even while midair, the tremors were potent enough to not only shake nearby canyons, but everything for around 100 miles. The quaking even managed to reach the mantle of the earth, fracturing the millions of years of molten rock that had formed. The energy waves were on equal footing at first impact. Howbeit, the unbridled ferocity of a Saiyan and the advanced cellular biology coupled together was truly a force to be reckoned with, and for Frieza, his current power simply wasn't enough to match it. Nappa's new and improved breaker cannon devoured Frieza's energy wave like it was a tiny appetizer, and made its way toward the main course, roasted lizard. GGGRRRHHH. Frieza did nothing but remain motionless as he was served up on a hot platter. Captain Ginyu cried out, "My lord." Up in the sky, Nappa slyly grinned. "Rest in pieces." On the bystanders' stands, something caught Rakum's eye. "Look." Rakum pointed up above him, and sure enough, Lord Frieza was floating up in the sky, assuming the same confident smirk on Nappa's face. Concurrently, the Saiyan general's lips pursed downward into a disappointed grimace. "Of course, it's a real bitch, ain't it?" said Frieza. "When you can't properly annihilate someone, it makes you feel like you've lost your touch at murder." "Well, I wouldn't know the feeling." Both warriors floated down to the ground yet again. "You know, in a way, I'm actually rather relieved that you're the legendary Super Saiyan." Nappa snarled. "What are you talking about?" By the time Nappa finished his sentence, they had already reached the ground. "Oh, isn't it obvious to you?" said Frieza. "Well, with your abysmally low intelligence, I imagine it would take some time for your mind to wrap your head around this. If it isn't obvious to you," Frieza gestured his hands to his entire body, "this isn't the form you've been familiar with the past 25 years. You transformed. So what? Well, rather than wasting my time explaining it to you, why don't I treat you to the same terror the other Earthlings had the pleasure to experience? Yes, perhaps this would be the best way to understand just how truly helpless you are against me. You see, each time I transform, my power increases exponentially, and as it so happens, I still have 2 transformations beyond this one. So are you finally starting to put the pieces together in that virtually non-existent brain of yours?" "You're bluffing," shouted Nappa. In response, Frieza egotistically leered. "Now, allow me to demonstrate. You should consider this an honor. You shall be the first one to ever lay eyes upon me in this next state." Frieza crossed his arms and held his hands out to his sides. As soon as he did, a crimson aura with a black outline flared up. Simultaneously, red bioelectricity was generated all around him. Nappa grit his teeth and raised his hands up in defensive position. "Prepare yourself and behold the second transformation of the mighty Frieza," Frieza shouted in agony, unnerving Nappa as he did so. Suddenly, 2 large spikes grew out of his upper back, with a smaller spike forming a few inches above his tail. He went from shouting to grunting as he underwent his transformation. The 2 shoulder pads of his biologic exosuit shot out, increasing several inches in length. Then came quite probably the most alarming and abhorrent change in his figure. His skull started to elongate, being the most painful part of the transformation. His neck veins bulged and his eyes stretched out in his sockets. On his head, 2 more small spikes grew out to accompany his black horns, which were actually turning white for some bizarre reason. For the final touch, his head instantaneously protracted outward, becoming about 2 feet long. A loud sigh of relief escaped Frieza's lips once his transformation was complete. He now stood about an inch taller than Super Saiyan Nappa, although his gargantuan head made the difference in height appear much larger. "What do you think? Was it worth the wait?" The voice Frieza spoke with now was somehow even deeper than before. The Saiyan general showed palpable facial signs of disgust. It appeared like he was about to vomit. His senses were tingling with danger throughout the entire transformation. He could feel an immense rise in power that he wasn't prepared for. "You vile freak." A chorus of amused chuckles came from Frieza. Nappa hadn't expected this sudden turn of events. Be that as it was, Nappa wouldn't be intimidated like this. "So what? You changed into a Ridley Scott ripoff monster. You think that will make any difference against me? I'm the Super Saiyan of legend, a warrior of pure fighting instinct and unprecedented power. Scum like you can transform 100 times, and still not even be a tenth as mighty as me. Well, I guess we'll find out soon enough, won't we? I guess we will, replied Nappa. The two combatants took a fighting stance. Round 2 of the legendary Super Saiyan versus the Emperor of the Universe was about to begin. The Super Saiyan's golden aura flared up around him again. He lunged for Frieza, determined to wipe that smug grin of Frieza's face. You're mine, Frieza. Before his very eyes, Frieza vanished. Nappa incoherently stuttered. Where did he go? He was a Super Saiyan. His battle instincts should be at their peak. There was no way he could lose sight of him so quickly, especially when he was right in front of him. Right behind you. The voice that spoke was so calm, it was almost frightening. Frieza kicked Nappa in the small of his back, eliciting a grunt of pain from Nappa. Nappa swung his body around to strike Frieza, but he was already gone. Frieza struck again, punching Nappa hard in the cheek. Nappa quickly flew up into the sky to gain some distance from Frieza. I've got to keep on guard, spoke Nappa to himself. I can beat this bastard. I just have to play it smart. He craned his head back to see if Frieza was catching up to him. But to his shock, he was gone. He turned his head back in front of him, and surprise, surprise, Frieza was floating right in front of him. How nice of you to join me. I've been waiting for quite some time. The veins in Nappa's forehead bulged out of control, and the golden aura sprang up to life as rage flowed forth through the mighty Saiyan's veins. Why, Nappa struck Frieza with a hard punch, but to his surprise, Frieza had no problems dodging it. Nappa continued with a string of punches, but Frieza continued to swiftly evade all of his strikes, all the while smiling like he was on a Sunday stroll. Damn it. Even though Nappa's speed was impressive, it was like all of his power was inconsequential in the face of this new transformation. Frieza cackled in delight. It seems like you're rather befuddled. You know, you could always start flinging your feces as a last resort. Who knows, you might get a lucky throw. Nappa fired a short-range breaker cannon from his mouth. A bright flash filled the sky. The corners of his mouth raised upwards in delight. Yes, a direct hit. He beamed with confidence. No matter how much power Frieza had gained from this new form, there was no way he could survive a point-blank blast like that. He was done for. When the bright light waned out, the corners of his mouth dropped down to the ground. There wasn't a single scratch to be found on Frieza's hideous body. Now that you realize your Super Saiyan power is of no use anymore, that feeling of helplessness I was hoping to elicit must be settling in nicely. Frieza raised his right hand up into the air. Now, have you ever heard of paintball? Yes, just remove the T. I don't get it. A lightning-fast beam of purple energy shot out of Frieza's fingertip and hit Nappa in the knee. I get it. Firing from both his fingertips now, the Space Emperor chuckled with glee and proceeded to torture Nappa with an endless barrage of death beams. Nappa attempted to power up, to get out of the crazy finger beams, but there were too many of them for him to properly concentrate with the searing pains shooting up through him. On the sidelines, Guldo, Recoome, Zarbon, and Captain Ginyu were smiling, content in seeing their master overpower that filthy idiotic ape. Lord Frieza's really showing him what for, said Recoome. Nappa doesn't stand a chance now, added Guldo. I always knew Lord Frieza had the edge, said Captain Ginyu. Even a Super Saiyan doesn't stand a chance against the Emperor of the Universe. The battle's already over. On the ground, King's entire body was drenched with sweat. He had already taken Metal Bat, Bang, Bomb, and Tatsumaki off of the battlefield and out of harm's way. By the time he got to Atomic Samurai, however, most of the strength had left his body, so he was reduced to dragging the remaining heroes off with the rest of them. It had taken a few minutes, but he finally managed to get everyone to safety. Well, everyone except Super Alloy Darkshine. If he tried to drag that 550-pound hunk of flesh, he would throw his back out, maybe even break it. Now that he finished his job, he turned his attention back to the battle between Frieza and Nappa. Even though they were high up in the air, it didn't take hawk-like vision to see Nappa was getting pummeled. He squinted his eyes and realized Frieza's form was different from before. His head was like 2 feet long, and a bunch of spikes had popped out of his back. He was so busy with rescuing the heroes, he must have completely missed this unfortunate turn of events. If things kept going on as they were now, not only King, but the entire planet would be done for. That bluff had been a stroke of unbelievable luck, and he wasn't very confident he could occupy Frieza's attention long enough for Saitama to arrive. We're gonna need another miracle. His metallic feet crunched loudly against the asphalt on the sidewalk. Armored Gorilla, member of the House of Evolution, an organization once dedicated to eradicating the world of inferior lifeforms and creating human perfection, was returning home from a quick visit to the grocery store. He had to admit, he somewhat enjoyed the tranquility of this new lifestyle. Dr. Genos and his clones were now treating him with much more respect than before, and there was an air of mutual respect between them that hadn't been there before. He looked around him, noticing the desolate nature of the landscape and the absence of any life. Did this have something to the monster association that Gorilla Monster had mentioned earlier? He wasn't sure. He walked up to the shop. He had finally made it back home. A bell chimed when Armored Gorilla opened the door. At the sound, one of Dr. Genos' clones kindly greeted Armored Gorilla. "Good afternoon, Armored Gorilla." Armored Gorilla smiled back at the clone. "Good afternoon, Doctor. I got the ingredients you needed for the new takoyaki dish you wanted to add to the menu." "Excellent. Let's get started right away." Armored Gorilla walked behind the counter with the clone to prepare his cuisine. Outside the shop, the S-Class hero, Zombiman, was standing with his hands stuffed into his coat pocket. Zombiman had trailed this ape for quite some time, and at last, he had finally found the base of operations for the organization that was responsible for all of the havoc wreaked upon the world these past few days. "It doesn't look like much, but this is it. This small, unassuming restaurant is what I've been looking for. Your reign of terror ends now, Dr. Genos." Zombiman paced forward and pushed the doors open, determined for the fight that was surely about to begin. Despite being the expert detective, the immortal hero had seldom caught the two henchmen following him up in the sky, just as Zombiman had done with Armored Gorilla. Carmath and Orlin hovered down to the ground and stood just inches in front of the restaurant. "All right, we found out where these two punks were headed," said Orlin. "Now can we finally kill these guys?" Orlin charged up his Kai gun and hurriedly sprinted into the store, but just before he could push the doors open, Carmath grabbed him by the shoulder and slung him backward. Orlin shot Carmath an enraged look. "No, not yet. We still don't know anything about them." Carmath, at random, began clicking on his scouter, causing it to beep rapidly as it turned on. "What are you doing?" asked Orlin. "And switching my scouter to surveillance mode," replied Carmath. Orlin's eyes widened in mild surprise. "You can do that?" "Yep. It's a pretty handy feature for espionage activities and such." "Now be quiet. The scouter needs absolute silence in order to properly pick up the sound waves in the other room." Orlin nodded and quietly tippy-toed his way beside Carmath. The foot soldier's heart was racing with the excitement of what he was about to uncover. With this, their lives were hopefully secured. The three scientists were working as ardently as ever in Bafoy's laboratory. Papers were flying everywhere. Keys were being vigorously typed so quickly and with so much pressure, they were close to being cracked. The adrenaline was pumping through all of their bodies, fueling their thought process and their vigorous working efficiency. Bafoy's spy drones had picked up some very distressing events. All of the S-Class heroes, minus King, for some odd reason, had been taken out by the Devil of Frost. With a great touch of irony, the next one who was fighting Frieza was, in fact, Frieza's henchman and the very individual who had just escaped the holding cell. And thanks to Bafoy's advanced technology integrated in his drones, they were able to accurately capture all of the movements of the ongoing battles. "Have you finished implementing the binary codes?" said Bafoy to Dr. Cusino. "Just finished," replied Dr. Cusino. "How much time is left before the data upload is completed?" questioned Child Emperor. "About 98% of the data has been successfully uploaded to the hard drive." The three scientists were so busy with their work, none of them noticed Sich sprinting into the room and rushing up to their side, shouting, "What's going on? Is this weapon of yours ready?" No response was given to Sich. The employee ran his hands through his hair in aggravation, and shook the body of Dr. Cusino to get his attention. The good doctor was momentarily snapped out of his working mode and turned his attention to the nerve-wracked man waiting for him. "Is the weapon ready?" said Sich in a practically shouting tone of voice. "We're almost there," replied Dr. Cusino. The doctor clicked on the table surface, and Genos' face appeared as a holographic image on the table. "Genos, have you finished applying the required modifications to the weapon?" "Yes, doctor," replied Genos. "Good." Another separate holographic image popped up on the screen, causing Dr. Cusino to smile with relief. "Yes, the data upload has just finished. Alex, Bafoy, we are a go." The two genius scientists looked to their fellow scientist and nodded. "Initiate the launching sequence." "Got it." The trio sprinted up to the keyboard and all three of them began rapidly typing, occasionally pushing each other as they did. "Put the coordinates in." "Understood." Sich stood behind Bafoy, Dr. Cusino, and Child Emperor and silently watched them prepare this weapon to be launched. Whatever kind of weapon this was, it must have been a truly powerful object to behold. A monitor hung up on the wall came to life above the four, and on it, a giant red number appeared, a countdown clock. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Launch. The ground beneath them violently shook, knocking all four of them off balance. Then, a loud, roaring noise reverberated not just in the laboratory, but throughout the entire Hero Association headquarters. Offway took control of the keyboard, and switched the security camera lens to show them the weapon that was shooting up in the sky, creating a large cloud of smoke as it did. It's finally done. The Super Saiyan of legend wasn't quite living up to his title on the battlefield. 1,000 years after the last seen Super Saiyan, Nappa was honoring the title's legacy by getting his ass completely handed to him by the lizard that exterminated his race and tore whatever remaining pride the Saiyan race had left. In the sky, Frieza's crazy finger beams were still pelting Nappa like a swarm of angry bees. After about the 1000th death beam, Nappa's sturdy body finally wore out, and he began a rapid free fall to the ground. Frieza smiled as he watched Nappa's broken body fall through the air. Nappa's body cracked the ground below him, and he went out of his Super Saiyan form, the stress too much for him to overcome. What a sight to behold! Frieza flew downward to his defeated opponent, the Super Saiyan of legend, standing before me in humiliating defeat. It's like a dream come true. The lizard now stood over Nappa, basking in the self-adulation of his victory. It appears that all this time, I was worried over nothing. Frieza pointed his fingers to Nappa's head, a tiny pink glow of energy forming at the tips. When you see King Vegeta in hell, tell him I said, like a bitch. Hold on. A faint and unusual sound filled Frieza's ears, causing him to halt his killing. Likewise, on the sidelines, Zarbin, Raccoon, Guldo, Captain Ginyu, and King picked up this odd anomaly in the sky. They looked up, and on the edge of the horizon, a glowing purple comet was making their way toward them at tremendous speed. Frieza let out a sigh of exasperation. Oh God, what is it now? None of them could tell what it was inside of that purple comet, but they would quickly find out. Seconds later, the comet whooshed above of King. The strongest man on the planet was blown away by the wind currents and thrown completely off balance. On Frieza's ship, all four spectators were also pushed back by the air pressure from this unknown comet. The comet changed its trajectory to move more downward, heading directly toward Frieza and the defeated Nappa. When the comet hit the ground, gusts of wind pressure rushed Frieza. The kinetic energy from this comet's velocity spread throughout the ground and caused Frieza's body to shake like a maraca. Wait, Frieza's eyes widened. The purple energy around this comet was beginning to fade, revealing the comet hidden beneath it. Only it wasn't a comet. The hidden thing wasn't even an object. It was a person. When Frieza observed this unknown arrival with more detail, he took note of many peculiar oddities of this newcomer. He wore a plain white shirt and black pants, but coursing all throughout him, a purple glow emanated, filling all holes, crevices, and grooves on his body. He moved his eyes up to look at his face. His eyes had purple sclere with fiery orange irises. And the intensity. Frieza could see in this newcomer's eyes such passionate intensity yet cunning ruthlessness at the same time. He almost looked like a villain. About 100 miles away, Dr. Cusino, Child Emperor, and Metal Knight were beaming in pride and awe at the battlefield being taped through Bafoy's drones. Sitch was the only one who had no idea what this meant. So where is the weapon? All three scientists stared at Sitch with an "Are you fucking kidding me?" kind of look. What? The weapon? Shouldn't it have arrived by now? All I see is Demon Cyborg with a different appearance. Don't you get it? Said Bafoy. Genos is the weapon. Once Sitch's mind put the pieces together, his face changed from confused to amazed, just like the other three scientists. Wow. Back on the battlefield, Frieza's smile had vanished, and the calm, relaxed demeanor was squashed by a serious and cautious disposition. You're quite the interesting fellow there. Who are you? The air was moist with apprehension. Curiosity dominated the surrounding. Tension wrapped itself around everyone, waiting for an explanation to who this random stranger was. Genos replied with only 2 words. You're deaf. Even though his conscience was inside this new body, he still could not believe this was real. This was what he'd been dreaming about for years, to have the power to eradicate evil. And it was all thanks to one person, Dr. Cusino. Genos, there's something that I've been meaning to tell you, but I wanted to wait until everything was in place so you wouldn't get too anxious. The eyebrow of the cyborg shot up. What are you talking about? Let me show you. Dr. Cusino and Genos entered a room in Bafoy's laboratory he was not familiar with. The lights were even dimmer in this room than in the main laboratory room. But at the edge of the room, a bright, purple orb of energy the size of a wrecking ball was glowing brightly, shining light on at least half of the room. "What is that?" said Genos, pointing at the giant orb as he spoke. "That is the power source of the space pirate's ship, and the key to limitless power." A voice could be heard at the center of the room. As soon as the voice spoke, the lights above increased their luminosity, causing Genos and Dr. Cusino to squint. When their eyes adjusted, they saw Bofoy and Alex standing side by side, tapping the tabletop, appearing impatient, as was to be expected with the weight of the world resting on their shoulders. "We don't have a lot of time, so let's make this explanation quick," said Bofoy. "Can somebody please tell what's going on?" said Genos on a voice that bordered on shouting. "Genos," Dr. Cusino put both his hands on the cyborg's shoulders. "Thanks to the help of my brother and Alex, we've developed something that can surpass even your master in strength." The last part of the sentence piqued the cyborg's curiosity, and both of his eyebrows shot up while his eyes widened. "You did what?" "You see, ever since I created a cybernetic body for you and downloaded the contents of your brain and memory into this new body, I've been trying to find ways to expand upon this technology. After months of brainstorming and tinkering, I came upon an idea to create a new human body with synthetic tissue so you could live and grow as a real human, instead of completely relying on upgraded parts for increased strength. And it worked. I managed to synthetically create living tissue to form a living body, and combined with the cybernetic augmentations, a new sapient construct was born, a being perfectly balanced with both organic and inorganic material. It took me many years to perfect the technology and integrate living flesh with machinery as one. But this new construct was my first success. Alas, I ran into an unfortunate problem. In order to stabilize the cellular bondage and properly establish a neural system that would smoothly respond to the user's thoughts and human reflexes, I needed a major power source. But no matter where I looked or how hard I tried, there was no power source on Earth that could complete this android body. But as you know, we were visited by those not from Earth." Dr. Cusino motioned to his older brother to follow up. Once Bofoy got the message, he cleared his throat and said, "When I was scavenging through the ruins of the fallen spacecraft, I discovered the main power source of the ship. It was cracked, but not irreparable. As you can see," Bofoy motioned his hand to the same purple orb of energy at the edge of the room. "The damage has been completely repaired, and thanks to the support of my brother and Alex, we were actually able to get it running again." Alex couldn't keep his excitement contained any longer. And the best part is, Alex rapidly typed on the keyboard monitor. A panel opened up from the ground, and rising up was Genos. Genos gasped. If he had a heart, it would have leapt up to his mouth. There was another body. They'd made Genos another body. Stricken with curiosity, he proceeded to walk up to the body in fascinated shock, observing this new body in great earnest, admiring all of the details of this new body. "Amazing," muttered Genos under his breath. "The best part is that we were actually able to reverse engineer the energy source and make it smaller." Alex spoke in a frantic, excited, and almost shouting tone while Genos continued to admire the new cybernetic body. "Isn't that awesome?" "Quite," added Dr. Cusino, smiling at the boy's fervent enthusiasm. "The three of us spent 3 days working on your body and manufacturing the orb, with only about 4 hours of sleep at maximum. But it was all worth it in the end. We've made a body beyond anything mankind has ever seen." Dr. Cusino shuffled to Genos' side, hoping that Genos would be satisfied with the work, and seeing the awe-stricken face on the teenage cyborg's body, he was beyond satisfied. "So, are you ready to become the strongest man on Earth?" So stricken was the cyborg with amazement, he could only give a small nod as a response. Dr. Cusino's lips curved up into a larger smile. "Excellent. Today is the day that you will achieve your greatest victory. Today, you will be the only hero in human history to defeat a god-level threat single-handedly." This flashback in the mind of Genos had finished. Genos silently spoke to himself under his breath. "I'm going to honor your words, Doctor." He took note of the Devil of Frost with great detail, observing his scales, body armor, and cold eyes, comparing it to a reptile. "It appears he was even more hideous than he thought." "Talking to yourself," said Frieza. "Hardly a good first impression." Genos narrowed his eyes and met Frieza's stern gaze with a cold, murderous stare. "I'm not here to listen to your quaint humor," replied Genos cuttingly. "Our planet has been preparing for your visit for quite some time, and it was because of the fear of your impending arrival that this new body has been created for me. With it, I will bring an end to the greatest threat this planet has ever seen." "Oh, you're putting your serious face on." "Ooh, we're getting real serious, got to take it really seriously now." Genos noticed the prisoner's body lying unconscious on the ground. So he had been defeated by this Devil of Frost. He looked behind him, and his eyes widened. All of the S-Class heroes, minus King, were lying unconscious on the ground. All of them had been defeated. Every single one of them was laid to waste by this monster. He hadn't expected that. It appeared he'd arrived in the nick of time. He refocused his attention on the matter at hand. I don't take kind to mockery, and I've enough of your inane dribble. Is that so? Well, why don't I? Frieza's sentence was cut short by the cyborg's fist that planted itself into Frieza's chest. The force sent Frieza hurtling up into the sky in a diagonal direction for a few hundred meters, pushing Frieza far away from the battlefield. Genos jumped up to meet him, clasped his hands together into a single balled fist, and slammed him back down to the earth. A huge crater was formed, spanning about 20 meters wide and 30 meters deep. Up in the sky, Genos gazed at both his palms, as if they were illusions and the entire thing was a dream. But despite this, he knew that never in his wildest dreams could he have thought this kind of power was attainable. And this was while he was still getting used to his new body. While Genos was hovering midair, Genos bent his knees down, rotated his body downward, and propelled himself down to Frieza. The Space Emperor was slow to get up. He ran his hand over his face and let out a labored sigh. That punch was rather powerful, although with the new trend that was growing, he supposed he shouldn't been surprised. How many more goddamn surprises do I have to deal with? This laborious meddling is striking my final nerves. Frieza pushed himself off of the ground and saw Genos sprinting toward him. But this time, Frieza would be prepared. Frieza blocked the cyborg's punch with his elbow and attempted to meet all of Genos' punches with his own fists. But with every punch, he could feel his punches being nullified, overpowered by the sheer strength of this cyborg. What the machine gun blows? Genos decided to elevate the intensity of his punches and performed his upgraded combo move. It was unbelievable. Comparing the strength and speed of his previous machine gun blows and current machine gun blows was like comparing a soldier to an army. There simply weren't any comparisons to make. Frieza released a burst of energy around him to halt Genos' barrage of punches. It worked, although left him with no damage and only sent him back 10 meters. You've got quite the spunk for a youngling like yourself. Frieza floated up into the air, and Genos quickly followed suit. With this new body, he was able to use the energy from the orb and propel himself upward into the sky through his hands and his feet. Genos was thinking to himself, internally going through the plethora of new weapons he now had available. One of the available options caught his attention: energy beams. Genos channeled the energy from the orb and brought it to his palms. The cyborg held out his palms toward Frieza and allowed the energy to be released. Genos didn't know what to expect, but he certainly didn't expect this. A purple beam of energy with an orange outline burst forth from his palms and ignited the entire sky. "What?" shouted Frieza. Frieza hadn't been prepared for such a large energy blast, and in an instant, he was sent flying back into the ground. The entire canyon range was blown up in a fiery explosion. The force of the explosion was large enough that even several hundred meters away, both Frieza's ship and the spectators were rocked in their spots. The spectators covered their eyes from the blinding light. "Who is that?" said Rikum. "I have no idea," replied Goldo. "But whoever he is, he's goddamn tough." "You've got that right, Goldo," said Rikum. "Where do these warriors come from?" said a baffled Captain Jinyu. "Every single one has been able to match and even best Lord Frieza's changing forms. It's unbelievable." Back in the sky, the light was beginning to fade, and the scene was coming into view. Hovering in the sky, Genos still had his hands extended outward from his energy blast. So this was the destructive power now laying within him. He hadn't meant to release such a large burst of energy. To know an ordinary blast like that could create such devastation was unbelievable. Saitama would have to take him seriously now. In fact, he probably surpassed his master now. And now that Genos had taken care of the threat, he'd challenge Saitama once again. The battle had to have been over. No one could survive a blast like that. Well. Genos let out a slight gasp, floating just a few feet above the ground. Frieza glanced at Genos with an irate demeanor. His body was still covered in white smoke from the blast. His arms were in a crossed position to defend himself, but they were now covered with several bruises and scratches. That was something. I'm not going to lie, that actually hurt just a bit. Frieza flew up to Genos, and now faced Genos with only a few feet of distance between them. "But I wouldn't let that go to my head. Every one of your pitiful acquaintances attempted to fight me all at once, and look what happened to them. Even the legendary Super Saiyan, the warrior of untold might who appeared every 1,000 years, was but a mere inconvenience to me in the grand scheme of things. So what hope do you have of stopping me?" The energy from the orb came to life, enveloping Genos like a purple aura. Genos' face scrunched in anger, and his unmitigated fury against all things evil was amplified by this new and improved biomechanical body. "You're wrong. Thanks to the efforts of the greatest scientific minds on this planet, what you see before you is the perfect combination of organic flesh and mechanical engineering. Using the energy source from the space pirates, I am now the strongest hero on this planet. Not even a god-level threat like you can stand up to me now. This utmost confidence was uncanny for Genos, but he couldn't help it. The power was getting to him. Keep telling yourself that. Frieza struck Genos, and the two of them disappeared instantaneously. Like the battle before, none of the spectators could see what was going on, and like before, the only proof of the ongoing battle was the intense bursts of air pressure originating from the warriors' fists colliding in the air. As the two fighters were exchanging blows, Frieza performed a mid-air front flip and slammed Genos with his tail. Genos caught his tail before it hit him, and kicked Frieza in his back with his foot. Genos followed up and struck Frieza's head with his elbow. Frieza let out a groan of pain and was sent flying to the ground. But Frieza quickly stopped himself and fired a barrage of death beams up at Genos. Genos met his death beams with an incineration cannon, which managed to dissipate the death beams entirely. Frieza soared back up to the sky and struck Genos in the gut with his very long head. An illogical move, said Genos coldly. At first, Frieza didn't see what he meant by that, but he was quickly made to understand the error when Genos grabbed the top of his head. Frieza tried to break free of the grip, but Genos' grip was like iron, and his arms couldn't reach Genos to strike him. Genos began to spin Frieza, gradually gaining speed until he looked like a giant purple spinning wheel. After spinning Frieza around at such intense speed for 5 seconds, Genos finally let go of his grip on him and sent him falling like a comet from space. Another crater was formed to go along with the many craters formed from the previous and ongoing battles. The cyborg flew back to the ground, standing above Frieza, whose large head was planted in the ground, leaving the rest of his body in an upside-down position. Look at your position. How embarrassing. Fuck off. Frieza's tail wrapped around Genos' wrist, taking him by surprise. Before he knew it, Genos was being twirled around in the air just as he had done to Frieza moments ago. After multiple twirls, Frieza began bashing Genos on the ground back and forth. Enough. The purple aura from Genos sparked to life again. A large blade popped out of Genos' elbow, with a light orange outline of heat. With a mighty thrust, Genos swung his arm down and sliced Frieza's tail off. The Space Emperor let out a short but pain-ridden scream as he felt the hot steel from the cyborg's blade stinging his severed tail. Frieza planted his hands on the ground and unlodged his long head from the ground. He took a look at the stump of his tail, and his fury skyrocketed. Veins on his forehead throbbed, and his hands balled into fists. How dare you? Genos lunged for Frieza, but a burst of energy was released from Frieza's body. A bright white aura enveloped him as he took control of his anger and wielded it like a weapon, causing Genos to recoil backward. You'll pay for that. This time, it was Frieza who initiated the attack. Genos put his hands up in defensive position and proceeded to dodge and block Frieza's strikes. While Frieza was attacking, Genos could hear him grunting in anger, clearly frustrated with the high skill Genos was displaying. Frieza kicked Genos in the chin with his foot, sending him flying in the air. Frieza grabbed Genos' leg and swirled him around to throw him off balance. He threw Genos into a valley of rocks, destroying the valley in the process. Genos instantly bounded back up to Frieza and swung his arm blade, but Frieza elbowed him in the face before he had the chance to counter. Frieza grabbed the blade and broke it in half. He then held onto the blade and stabbed Genos in the head with it. But before the blade could reach his cranium, Genos caught the blade and swatted it out of Frieza's hand. Suddenly, a bright glow came to life at Genos' center chest. Frieza's eyes widened. From his chest, a surge of purple energy burst forth and enveloped Frieza. This energy attack was much shorter, lasting only half a second. Frieza quickly snapped out of the trauma from the blast and resumed his attack on Genos. But even with his increased power, Genos was somehow able to outmaneuver Frieza at every turn. How pathetic. Genos calmly thrashed Frieza, taking advantage of his overwhelmingly obvious weakness, his added bulk. His body was very disproportionate, and the added bulk on his shoulders and head made it harder for Frieza to properly track Genos. Had Frieza been fighting a weaker opponent, his strength and speed would make this weakness irrelevant. But Genos was not a weak opponent, and thanks to his enhanced body and analytical thinking, he would able to defeat this overgrown lizard by expertly exploiting his weaknesses. Stand still, you brat. In the air, Frieza's head was spinning as he tried to beat Genos down with little success. He was being made a fool by a mere child. He would not stand for this. So to end the humiliating beating, Frieza unleashed a burst of energy around him that spanned in all directions, forcing Genos to fly out of Frieza's vicinity. This ends now. The Space Emperor clasped both his hands together and formed a ball of red energy at his palms. Frieza formed a sadistic smile and shouted to Genos, "You're powerful, but let's see you handle this." Genos wasn't intimidated. With this new body, no monster could stand up to him now. The cyborg channeled the energy from the orb into his palms as he did before to stand up to Frieza's energy beam. His palm began to glow a bright purple, and a small ball of energy formed out of it. Both warriors continued to charge their respective attacks, with short bolts of electricity flying out of the energy and growing more volatile by the second. Bafoi's laboratory was eerie and quiet. Unlike before, with its hustle and bustle, the scientists were now silently watching the battle between Genos and the Devil of Frost, and they couldn't believe it. As Genos adapted to his new body, he only became more powerful and gained greater control over his new powers. Amazing. Minister Sich was viewing the battle alongside the three scientists, and like them, he was baffled by the power Demon Cyborg had displayed. He'd never seen any hero of the Hero Association demonstrate such extensive destructive abilities coupled with so many unique abilities. "You three really outdid yourselves," said Sich, staring at the three scientists, and feeling glad that they were on the side of the Hero Association. "We really did, didn't we?" replied Child Emperor, glowing with confidence. "Looks like this is about to be wrapped up rather quickly. At this rate, Saitama won't even be needed," added Bafoi, replicating the confidence of his former assistant. "Oh, Metal Knight, Minister Sich." The intercom buzzed on the wall, interrupting their conversation. "One-Punch-Man has just arrived." "Well, speak of the devil and he shall appear," said Bafoi. "All right, bring him down. I'm already here." The four of them turned around to see Saitama standing at the door with his arm resting against the door frame and his back slightly arched. His uniform had a few splotches of dirt and blood, and he was actually panting, which was rare to see from an S-class hero. Sich was the first to speak. "Saitama, where have you been? And why are you panting?" questioned Dr. Cusino. "Look, I've had to kill about 200 monsters on my way here, and I had to run all the way from Z City to a city, which is basically about a continent apart. So excuse the hell out of me if I'm a little out of breath." Saitama's attention quickly diverted from the doctors to the image on the monitor. "Is that Genos?" "Yes, indeed," replied Dr. Cusino. Saitama put his hands to his hips. Did they give him another set of upgrades? It had taken a second for Saitama to recognize him. "Why does he look different?" "He's in a new body we developed," replied Child Emperor. "He's actually able to overpower the Devil of Frost." "Unfortunately," added Sich, "all the other S-class heroes who fought him have been knocked out." "Seriously?" said Saitama with a surprised voice. When Saitama spoke now, the labored breathing had disappeared. It had taken only minutes, perhaps even seconds, for his body to recover. The scientists noticed this, but were not as surprised as they should have been. With all the intense and earth-shattering events that had transpired, this was basically the norm now. "He looks like a badass," said Saitama in awe. "He does indeed," replied Bafoi, smirking with pride. "He does indeed." Frieza released his energy blast, and with it, an enormous surge of wind current. The beam quickly made its way toward the cyborg, who was still charging his energy beam. His eyes were laser-focused, and his concentration was invested entirely on his blast. For this would be the finishing blow. Ultimate Incineration Cannon. What was unleashed from the teenage cyborg was a monstrous burst of power with a swirling torrent of orange flame and purple energy. When the two beams made contact, an intense struggle commenced for dominance. But in mere seconds, the cyborg's attack proved to be stronger than the lizard's, and the Space Emperor quickly came to know the opposing energy blast's warmth. The entire valley trembled uncontrollably. The bedrock underneath, which was already fractured, was now split up into millions of tiny cracked pieces. The quaking was so powerful, the entirety of Cydia began to shake, causing civilians to fall off their feet, and the foundations of some of the buildings to crack. The Jinyu Force and the other spectators saw the spectacle from afar, and were once again shocked by the newcomer's awesome power. Yet again, Lord Frieza had been overwhelmed by his opponent's power. Guldo, Recoome, and Captain Jinyu were shivering nervously. "Is it over?" Recoome doesn't believe it. "No, not again." Their fears were quickly put to rest, and each of them sighed a breath of relief when they saw Frieza still standing, albeit not in his best shape. Almost all of the spikes on Frieza's body had been chipped off. All over him, scratches and wounds were present, just like his scuffle with Nappa. His hands were aching from his attempt to block the cyborg's attack, and his breathing was labored. "Why you? This battle is over," shouted Genos. "With your bulky frame, your mobility has been significantly hindered. You cannot win." But what Frieza did next caught Genos off guard. He began maniacally laughing. He continued this laughing for a few seconds, and before Genos could ask him why he began a laughing fit, Frieza already gave him an answer. "Ah, you pathetic boy. I have to admit, you're much more powerful than I would have expected from this pathetic mudball. If this was the limit of my power, then you would indeed be correct in your assertion of victory. But unfortunately for you, the mighty Lord Frieza still has a final trick up his sleeve. If you had been here with your heroic little friends, you would have realized that I have the unique ability to transform." "What?" shouted Genos. "This little merry-go-round of new fighters with superior power has become rather vexatious for me. But at least you will be the final spectator to witness one final vision more terrifying than death. Lo and behold, my true, ultimate form." The Space Emperor clenched his fists together and bent forward as the final releases of restraint came undone. The ground underneath began to crack, and in the sky, white clouds turned into obsidian veil of death that crowded around their master. His entire body began to glow bright red, just as his first transformation. On the sidelines, Captain Jinyu was giggling and tingling with delight. "Captain, what's so amusing? We're about to witness Lord Frieza in his ultimate form. This is the greatest honor we could be given. That little punk doesn't stand a chance." On the ground, King silently and fearfully watched as Frieza underwent his final transformation. Where was Saitama? The world needed him now more than ever. Ugh! King turned around and let out a gasp of delight. The heroes were starting to wake up. "That's great. My head." Tatsumaki moaned in pain and proceeded to rub her head. Beside her, Atomic Samurai, Bang, Bomb, Super Alloy Darkshine, Garu, and Metal Bat gradually got up from their spots and pushed themselves off of the ground. "What happened?" said Garu. "Frieza beat all of you to a bloody pulp. Then, one of the 8 prisoners arrived and fought Frieza. The two did battle, then Frieza underwent another transformation. Now, Genos is fighting him and actually winning." Metal Bat gave Ming a skeptical look. "I still don't see why you haven't Faug." A loud roar from Frieza cut Metal Bat off, and they all looked across the valley to see Frieza covered in an aura of energy. "What's he doing?" said Bang. "He's undergoing, according to him, his ultimate transformation." "Well, I'm not gonna just sit around like a chicken," shouted Tatsumaki. "I'm going back in there." "Don't be a fool," said Bomb. "Frieza tossed us aside like garbage in his second form. In your weakened state and his new transformation, it wouldn't even be a battle." "Bomb is right," said Bang. "All any of us can do now is have faith that Genos can defeat Frieza." Beads of sweat began to fall down the cyborg's face as he watched this monster undergo his transformation. Whether or not this devil of frost could transform or not, his energy sensors were detecting a very high boost in power. If he allowed Frieza to finish this power boost, the consequences could be dire. "I have to put an end to this now, before this monster can wreak any more havoc." The teenage cyborg channeled the energy from the orb into his chest and concentrated. He felt the raw, overwhelming flow of power surge through him, giving him new life and even more confidence. With this attack, the Devil of Frost would be eliminated. "Genos, come in, Genos." Dr. Kusino's voice resonated in his ears, and an image of him appeared in his line of sight. "What is it, Doctor?" "I'm in the middle of preparing my final attack," said Genos with an irritated tone. "Yo, Genos." To his surprise, his master popped up on the screen beside the good doctor. "Master, you finally made it to a city." "Yay, and I gotta say, you are looking pretty cool." "Thank you, Master. I've managed to put the Devil of Frost in a corner, and I'm just about to finish him off." "No." This remark confused Genos. "Master, just wait for me to get there. I want a taste of the action. This might be what I've been looking for. Don't do anything. I'll be right there." Saitama turned the screen and left Genos alone. "I'm sorry, Master, but I'm not taking any chances. The risks are too great." The cyborg resumed charging his final attack. His chest began to glow a bright purple once again, and a purple aura flickered to life around him. On the ground, a bright white surge of energy bolted up to the sky from Frieza. Both power-ups were creating another intense pressure that enveloped itself around anyone who was unfortunate enough to be in its vicinity. Ultra Spiral Incinerate. The cyborg's chest cannon burst out of him with unbelievable force and sped through the sky toward its target. But unfortunately for the cyborg, it was too late, as Frieza unleashed the final level of his unimaginable power. A gargantuan explosion of unbalanced white energy surged forth. Unlike the beam struggle before, Genos' incineration cannon was the blast that was overwhelmed and dissipated into nothingness. Somehow, Frieza's transformation warped the very fabric of space itself, for when Frieza completed his transformation, the entire sky became as black as the night sky with small white particles, giving the illusion that outer space had wrapped itself around Frieza. Genos clenched his fists in anger and shook his head vigorously. "No, I was too late. That monster has unleashed his most devastating power, and I let it happen." Just like the memories of his disgraceful demise at the hands of Mosquito Girl flashed in his mind. Would history repeat itself today? Was he destined to be defeated yet again? Absolutely not. The passionate and goal-driven side of the cybernetic teenager overcame the internal doubt churning within him. With the power of this body, Genos could beat any foe that dare follow the path of evil. He had to. He owed it to his master and to himself, which was why he was prepared to single-handedly take on Frieza and reign victorious. The black sky quickly receded and made way for a clear sky, but Frieza was still hidden by a wall of white smoke. Genos tensed his body and held his arms up in preparation for what was to come. He was ready. The white smoke gradually began to fade, revealing the hidden secret behind it. Now, Genos didn't quite know what to expect from the Devil of Frost's final form, but he imagined it would be something along the lines of an even larger beast with even more hideous features. What he was witnessing now was a sleek, white and scrawny lizard with a tiny body that couldn't have been taller than 5 feet. Likewise, the spectating heroes were befuddled by Frieza's new appearance. "Is that it?" said Metal Bat. "He looks like a tiny wimp." "You idiot." Bang hit the young boy hard on the head, eliciting a growl from him. "You should know by now this monster's power has absolutely nothing to do with his appearance. I can't even imagine the strength now vesseled in that hideous body." Up in the sky, Genos continued to observe Frieza. Looking away from his small frame, Genos realized that Frieza's tail had actually grown back. And not only that, but all of the damage he had received earlier had vanished. There wasn't a single scratch on him. While his small body was misleading, Genos had no doubt that his previous form must have been tame compared to this. Frieza pointed his finger up toward Genos and stared straight into the teenager's eyes with those cold, calculating, hardened eyes. Bang! Before the teenager even realized Frieza had uttered that word, he was pelted directly in his chest with a red finger beam. The beam exploded upon contact, creating a black cloud of smoke that spanned several meters in diameter. Quickly clearing, Genos was revealed to now have a huge mark upon his chest, and his face distorted in shock and disbelief. Genos couldn't believe it. He didn't even have any reaction time to dodge or block the attack. It was instantaneous. "What in the hell have you become?" shouted Genos. The Space Emperor disappeared from the cyborg's view. He frantically looked across the valley to find him, but he didn't need to. Whispering in his ear, Frieza uttered, "Death." Genos angrily turned around and attempted to strike Frieza with a spinning kick, but Frieza effortlessly caught his leg. Genos grappled out of his grasp and prepared another attack. Machine gun blows. Genos threw a chain of lightning-fast punches at Frieza, yet Frieza dodged every single one of his punches with a neutral face, like he wasn't even trying. "How? It won't work this time." Frieza jabbed Genos in the gut, causing him to let out a grunt of pain and be sent back several meters. Genos focused his energy on his rocket boosters to increase his speed. Jet drive arrow. Using the blades in his feet to form an arrow, Genos blasted forth and prepared to fatally stab Frieza. The Devil of Frost was not amused. Using stealthy movement, Frieza expertly grabbed Genos' leg and, using the cyborg's momentum, changed his trajectory from sideways to downwards. Frieza then followed up with a barrage of finger beams which Genos simply couldn't evade. Each beam felt like a knife stabbing through him, compared to before, when they merely felt like tiny mosquito bites at best. The increase in power was unreal. Genos placed his palms upward and fired another incineration blast, hoping it would have some effect. It didn't. Frieza swatted the incineration blast like he would swat a common housefly. "What was that you were saying before?" "I didn't have a chance." Frieza appeared behind Genos and proceeded to pummel him like a punching bag. Genos tried to match his punches to effectively counter Frieza's movements, but it wasn't working. No matter how much he tried, Genos couldn't even land a single hit on his opponent. "I didn't think you were capable of such humor with such a serious demeanor. You really had me going there." Frieza was now just toying with Genos. The cyborg was no longer a match for him, and both of them knew it. This match was his. "I've failed you, master. I've failed you, and I've failed myself. I'm sorry." "Aw, is the little baby about to cry?" said Frieza. "Well then, let me tell you a tale to make you feel better." Frieza kicked Genos up into the air and slammed him back down to the ground with his tail. The end. The cyborg fell to the ground, motionless as he laid defeated. The Space Emperor calmly strode over to his side and looked down on him both figuratively and literally. "As entertaining a punching bag you are, I find there to be no more entertainment found here. Let's end this once and for all." Frieza lifted his foot up and placed it over the teenage cyborg's head. "Have a nice trip to hell." Frieza stomped his foot down and crushed dirt. The Space Emperor's eyes widened in surprise. Where the hell did he go? He was right there, but now he wasn't. Fluttering. Frieza's ears picked up on the sound of something fluttering in the wind. He turned his head to see where this fluttering noise was coming from, and he had to say, he wasn't expecting this. Genos was now cradled in a man's arms. The man had a yellow jumpsuit with red gloves and red boots, and his head was completely devoid of hair. Another newcomer. Honestly, this planet is positively crawling with pests. The newcomer gave no response. The heroes squinted to see who had just arrived, and when they realized who it was, most of them gasped. Some gave scowls, others gave disappointed looks as they knew the newcomer's fate already, but a few, King in particular, were utterly ecstatic and brimming with new life. "He's actually here," said King with a dazed tone of voice. In his arms, Genos slowly opened his eyes to look upon his savior, and when he did, his heart melted in utter relief. "Master." "Hey there, Genos. You look pretty banged up." The cyborg grunted in agreement. "I couldn't stop him. He was too strong." "Well, you did good managing by yourself for this long. Give yourself a pat on the back." "Excuse me." Saitama turned his head around to see an irritated, tiny lizard staring at him with squinted eyes and crossed arms. "I'm in the middle of something. If you want to wait your turn to die like the rest of these vermin, then take a number." Wait. Saitama put Genos on the ground and turned his body completely to face this tiny lizard. "Are you that Frieza guy everybody's been talking about?" Frieza's angry face changed to that of confusion. "I am Lord Frieza, yes. And who are you?" "The name's Saitama, and I'm a hero for fun. I've been waiting for a good fight for a long time, and I gotta tell you, you don't really." "Hold it right there, Baldy." A voice rung out in the air. That voice wasn't Saitama's, or Frieza's, or even Genos, but it was someone really close. Who was it? Who else had arrived? Saitama and Frieza looked around to see who had just spoken, and after a few seconds of searching, found the guy they were looking for standing on top of a ledge. It was a man with spiky black hair and a suit very similar to that of Saitama, with a few notable differences. Unlike Saitama's suit, this man's jumpsuit was black with a fiery contour around the zipper at his neckline. Yet like Saitama, he has a snow-white cape that fluttered in the afternoon wind. In a lot of ways, he actually looked like Saitama before losing his hair. Saitama took this in with curiosity. The heroes noticed this other newcomer's presence, but couldn't distinguish who it was. "Do you know who that is?" said Atomic Samurai. "I have no idea," said Super Alloy Darkshine. "What's that person doing here? Doesn't he know this place is dangerous?" stated King. "Tornado, do you recognize that person?" The Esper gave no response. "Tornado." Everyone looked to see why Tornado wasn't responding, and realized that she was completely frozen. Her body was shaking like a leaf, yet she was frozen at the same time. The Esper's eyes began to water, and for the first time, she actually seemed to have a genuine smile. "Who is that?" said Garu. "It's BLBLBLLBL. The name's Blast, and I'm here to kick your ass." Genos gasped. That was the S-Class Rank 1 hero Blast. Genos had always pondered where or who this unknown hero really was, but if he was here, that only accentuated the gravity of the monster facing them right now. Likewise, all the heroes were letting out gasps of amazement, as only one of them had ever seen this man in person. Blast. The S-Class hero turned his head and saw a familiar face flying toward him. The face of a little girl he saved many years ago. But he didn't expect that little girl to stay a little girl, and he certainly didn't expect for her to come running into his arms like a scene from a romantic movie reunion scene. All of the heroes' jaws dropped to the floor, Tornado actually showing an emotion other than bitchiness. It must have been a dream. Well, if they had truly known about Tatsumaki's past, they would have known Blast was the one who had saved her life and was the one who convinced her to become a hero, but was the one who taught her to stay strong. Even in the darkest of times, he was one of the only people, besides Fubuki, that she actually cared about. "You came back," said Tatsumaki through watery eyes and sniffles. Blast uncomfortably patted Tatsumaki on the back. "It's been years since I last saw you," said Tatsumaki. "Where have you been?" "You know, just here and there, traveling around the country, chillaxing. The regular stuff." "I'm being really polite allowing you to have this conversation," said Frieza. True, replied Saitama. Frieza gave Saitama a confused glare. The Space Emperor's patience was close to its limit. He didn't know how much more he could take of this or why he was even waiting for this little reunion to end. It was unbearable. "Blast, is it?" said Frieza. "Quite a cute little name. Are you two related by blood?" Blast and Saitama looked at each other with blank stares and shrugged their shoulders. "I've never seen this guy in my life," said both of them simultaneously. "Then what's the deal with the somewhat matching uniforms?" "Luck, I guess," said Blast. "I work for the Hero Association as the top-ranked hero in the top-ranked class, So this is just my hero suit, said Blast. Saitama let out a faint gasp of surprise. Really? You're the S-Class rank 1 hero that never comes to the S-Class meetings? That's right, replied Blast. And you are? My name is Saitama, and I'm a hero who's actually employed with the Hero Association too. An S-Class rank 4. That's pretty impressive, said Blast with a tone of approval in his voice. You must be the real da. Excuse me. Frieza's irritated voice cut off Saitama and Blast's conversation. I'm sorry to put a pause on your little get-together, but unlike you two, I literally have 1,000 better things to do. So which of you two Wonder Twins is going to fight me? Tatsumaki snarled. Don't you dare talk to Blast. That W Tornado's sentence was cut off as she felt herself trapped in a psychic imprisonment ball. She tried to break free, but it was no use. She shivered in terror. Could he really have psychic abilities that were this powerful? Combined with his super strength, super speed, and energy projection, this just wasn't fair. With a flick of his fingers, Tatsumaki was sent flying back yet again as the trash she had been deemed by Frieza. She yelled out in pain when she felt the rock scrape her backside, and she just barely had enough energy to keep herself from falling to the ground. Damn it. Tatsumaki grasped her arm and weakly trudged over to the rest of the heroes, accepting her place in this battle like they already had. She wasn't even fighting, said Blast. That wasn't fair. Who cares? As I was saying, continued Frieza, how are you going to decide? I dunno, replied Saitama. How about rock, paper, scissors? Suggested Blast. Why not? Blast jumped off the boulder and walked up to Saitama. The two of them shook their arms 3 times and shot out their hands. To his utter annoyance and enragement, it was Blast who reigned supreme over Saitama, his rock crushing Saitama's scissors. The number 1 S-Class hero pumped his fist in pleasure, and shortly after, turned around to face the god-level monster. So you're next in the lineup, said Frieza. Well, are you ready to get your world rocked? Heh. Blast cracked his knuckles against each other and twisted his neck to create the sound of bones cracking, making himself appear even more badass. The better question is, are you ready for a blast from the past? I've never met you before. That line doesn't work there. Blast's smirk faltered, and he let out a series of sputtering noises. Whatever. Get ready for the mothering pain. Blast jumped off the ground and lunged for his newest opponent. The space pirates and S-Class heroes couldn't help but be a bit excited and interested about the way this legendary battle would unfold. Go Blast, shouted Tatsumaki. The S-Class hero landed a powerful right hook across Frieza's face, sending a few gasps throughout the crowd of spectators and eliciting a smile of glee and confidence from Blast and Tatsumaki. Yes, a direct hit, thought Blast. The power from Blast's punch was quite impressive. Well, so they thought. But every spectator felt their hearts pump up to their mouth when they saw Frieza stare at Blast like all he felt was a love tap. Amidst the wall of silence, the Space Emperor was the first to break through it. Well, that answers that question. What? Before Blast could inquire as to what Frieza meant, he was promptly greeted with a hard foot to his face. The hero was sent crashing into a boulder and was quickly buried under a pile of rubble. The seconds went by, and everyone was waiting for Blast to rise up from the rubble and shake off the attack like it was nothing. But it never happened. Everyone was stunned speechless. This is a joke, right? Said Saitama. Come on, Blast. We get the joke. Very funny. Now stop faking a knockout and get your ass off of the ground. I wanna fight too. Not even a pebble tumbled out of place. This can't be serious, spoke Frieza. You're telling me that the number 1 ranked hero on your planet, a lone wolf who hasn't been seen for years and whose power is basically subject to rumor, is knocked out after a single kick to the head? Apparently so, replied Saitama. Wow, honestly, Frieza wasn't sure whether he should be laughing or crying. Now I know how gamers who bought the Wii U felt. Ooh, how do you know about Space Nintendo? Weird. On the ground, the teenage cyborg was in shock just like everyone else. He had expected a legendary battle between Blast and Frieza, but the number 1 hero in the association was now lying under a pile of rubble. And the only one left to fight this monster now was Master Saitama. There was no way Genos would allow that to be the case. But on the slightly brighter side, at least it's my turn now, said Saitama. Frieza let out a hearty laugh. Oh please, you. If the number 1 S-Class hero couldn't even take a single hit, then how can his stupid-looking reject twin do any better? The next sentences they uttered were spoken simultaneously. Hey, watch who you're calling stupid-looking. I mean, look at yourself. With that big head, those weird lips, and those 2 holes you have ears. I mean, look at you, with that bald head, that derpy-looking face, those non-matching colors. Once both of them finished their string of insults, they gave one another nasty looks. What the hell did you say? Shouted both of them at the same time. Both of them disappeared from sight for a brief moment, then reappeared, their fists colliding with one another in a violent burst of rage. As soon as their fists collided, a huge gust of wind and pressure was released, with this power cracking the ground below them like the battles before, and the level of power shocking everyone who was watching. The clash ended as quickly as it started, and both warriors rebounded several feet away from each other. The Space Emperor gripped his hand and let out a slight wince of pain. "Damn," said Frieza, "you've got quite some power behind your punches." "Thanks," replied Saitama. "With that attack, I can say you're kinda strong. Usually most monsters I fight end up dying after the first punch, so you're definitely no pushover either. But it's too early to tell." Wait. Getting a glimpse of Saitama's power reminded Frieza of the description Vegeta gave of the warrior that defeated him and Nappa, and when he put the pieces together in his brain, he let out a gasp. "It's you. You're the one who not only defeated Burrows single-handedly, but took down Vegeta and Nappa like they were just foot soldiers." That'd be me. At last, Frieza's search finally bore fruit. Defeating someone as powerful as Burrows is no easy task. And now that I've gotten just a taste of your strength, I can truly comprehend the grandiose might hidden behind your misleading appearance and how you could have defeated such powerful beings so easily. The Space Emperor loosened his body and pointed his finger up towards Saitama. "My entire ulterior motive for transversing to such a deep breach of the cosmos was to ensure you were dealt with in one of two ways. You join my side, or you die by my side." Frieza paced up towards Saitama and stared at him with a steely yet lax gaze in his eyes, as if this was merely a business transaction between two different parties. "So I give you the choice now, join me, and you could live like a god." Saitama didn't even bat an eye. "Don't think so. I'm not here to be a part of your little group. I've been invited to far too many groups. I'm just here to kick your ass. Now enough talk. Let's get it on." The S-Class hero's disciple pushed himself off of the ground and took a fighting stance. He had spent the time on the ground focusing his energy on regeneration and to reboot his systems, and now he had recovered enough to assist his master in this battle. "Master, I will fight alongside you." Saitama chopped his hand through the air in a single swipe. "No, Master, you're too banged up. I'll fight him alone," said Saitama. "But Master, no buts. Go watch with the other heroes. I'll be fine." The teenage cyborg hesitated for a second, but decided to follow his master's wishes. "Yes, Master." He gave a quick bow to his master and flew off to join the spectating S-Class heroes. When he reached the group of spectators, they greeted him with a few pats on the back, although some didn't even look at him in the eye and crossed their arms with a defiant huff. "You are amazing," said Puri Prisoner. "Quite an admirable battle," spoke Bang. "How did you get so strong?" said King. Genos turned his head to face King and squinted his eyes. An uncomfortable tension stirred up inside King. Why was Genos looking at him like that? Shortly after, Genos stopped the squinting and replied, "Bofoy, his brother, and Child Emperor created a new body for me using the energy source from the alien spaceship that came to Earth." "I see," said Bang. "Hold on a second," said Atomic Samurai. "What are we gonna do about the Caped Baldy? There's no way he can take this monster on alone." "His name is Saitama," angrily replied Genos, "and my master can handle himself." Genos said this with confidence, but in his heart, he wasn't quite sure. Frieza had power unlike anything he had ever witnessed before, possessing strength and speed that made warriors like Carnage Kabuto look like wolf-level threats. Saitama would have to acknowledge this strength, and perhaps, just perhaps, he would get the fight he yearned for. Frieza condescendingly smirked. "Sending your friend off to fight me all alone. How gutless." Saitama gave Frieza a quizzical look. "Wait, how is that gutless?" "Because suicide is the coward's way out." In an unexpected twist, Saitama actually let out a laugh of amusement. "That's a good one," said Saitama. "You're actually pretty funny." Frieza bashfully shrugged his shoulders. "Well, I try. You keep that up, and maybe that'll make this battle even more fun." "Well then, let the fight commence." Both warriors lunged for each other yet again, and with that, the most historic battle the planet would ever see had begun. "Your reign of terror ends now, Dr. Genos." Armored Gorilla was standing behind the counter, putting away dirty plates and preparing to start the dishwasher, barely acknowledging this newcomer's existence. "Oh, are you a customer?" he said. "Just give me one moment, I'm washing dirty dishes." The newcomer scoffed. "How many times have you switched your hideout locations? So this time, you've decided to select an unassuming takoyaki stand for your disguise. Such an obvious and stupid ploy will not work on me. I've followed your trail, you can't fool me." The newcomer grabbed a pocket in his coat and pulled out a Desert Eagle. "I go now by the name of Zombiman, the hero with the immortal body. Does experiment sample number 66 ring any bell?" Outside of the food stand, Carmeth's eyes widened to the size of saucers, and his heart jumped up in delight. His partner noticed this, and he tapped his shoulder to get his attention. Carmeth, what's with that grin? That guy we were tracking. He's immortal. Carmeth found it hard to keep his voice down. Orlin gasped. He's immortal. Carmeth held his hand out to silence his partner. Quiet. I need to hear this. A hero who came from the House of Evolution, said Armored Gorilla. Sorry to tell you this, but the House of Evolution has been disbanded. Zombiman's jaw dropped down. What? Armored Gorilla stepped out of the counter and opened another door to his right. If you're interested in speaking to Dr. Genos, allow me to take you to him. He is right through this door. Zombiman's grip on his gun didn't loosen, but he hesitantly followed Armored Gorilla's directions and walked through the door. Dr. Genos, you have a visitor, said Armored Gorilla. Sitting on the floor with a cup of tea in his hand, Dr. Genos stared up to meet this new visitor. "Ah, it's you," spoke Dr. Genos. "What's going on here?" said Zombiman. "What game are you playing? Please, have a seat." Dr. Genos motioned Zombiman to take a seat, to which he did, albeit reluctantly. Dr. Genos grabbed a pot of tea positioned next to him, and grabbed another cup from his cupboard, pouring another glass for his guest, as if this were just a friendly chat between friends. "Here, have a cup of tea." Dr. Genos pushed the cup towards Zombiman, but Zombiman made no motion to pick it up. "I remember sample number 66 quite well," said Dr. Genos, adjusting his seat as he spoke in order to get more comfortable. "The one success of the Immortality series, an excellent specimen who destroyed my facility and disappeared." Had they been in the other room, the three of them would have heard some laughs of amazement and delight coming from outside of the takoyaki stand. "This is unbelievable." Carmeth turned his head toward his partner. "That man wasn't born naturally. Apparently, the owner of this restaurant, a man who goes by the name of Dr. Genos, created him artificially in an attempt to create an immortal being." Carmeth grasped both of Orlin's shoulders. "Do you know what this means?" Orlin could only shake his head as a response. "It means that if we capture that doctor, he might be able to find a way to make Lord Frieza immortal." When the gravity of this situation hit Orlin, a wide smile spread across his face. "And we'd be known as the ones who helped make Frieza immortal." "Now you're getting it," said Carmeth. "Aren't you glad you listened to me now? So what's the plan?" "Alright, here's what I'm thinking. I'll stay here and continue to listen in on the conversation. You call in the rest of the foot soldiers and tell them to track our scouter's signal. Can't the two of us just take them by ourselves?" "Didn't you hear what I said? That gorilla managed to take out a monster with a single hit. And the second guy has immortality, so we can't kill him. The most either of us can do is slow him down. If we want to do this right, we need numbers to overpower them." "I got it. Oh, and make sure to do it out of earshot so they won't hear you." Orlin nodded, and walked several meters away to call in the rest of the foot soldiers. Carmeth's heart was fluttering with delight. At last, his life was secured. On the fighting grounds, the spectators' heads were spinning, trying to catch just a glimpse of the ongoing battle. Like the battles before, the only sign that a battle was even taking place was the extremely sharp bursts of air pressure, and the fracturing rocks that split apart whenever they were in the vicinity of the colliding punches. "Amazing," said Atomic Samurai, "and to think I didn't view him as worthy enough to shake my hand." "If anything, you're not worthy of shaking his hand for holding yourself above him," said Genos sardonically. "He could swat you like a fly if he so chose." Atomic Samurai slightly bowed his head down in shame. "He really could. How could a hero be so powerful?" muttered Garu. The hero hunter was in stupefaction to know someone who followed the hypocritical, self-serving side of heroism could attain such a level of strength that far surpassed the levels of all other S-class heroes thus far. Could Garu ever attain this kind of power? Was it even possible? The 18-year-old just didn't know. On the battlefield, the terrain was electrified. Slowly but surely, the raw power of these two unbelievably powerful beings was beginning to unfold. The very earth itself would tremble in fear before their might. Frieza performed a series of front flips mid-air and swung his tail at Saitama, who easily dodged all of the tail attacks. Frieza continued his assault and struck Saitama with a barrage of punches, with the hero merely blocking or dodging his blows. Frieza took note of his opponent's bored expression, and he squinted his eyes in anger. Frieza then flew up into the sky, and using both of his palms, fired a beam of purple energy. Saitama's eyes widened. He can fly and shoot laser beams. Saitama bent his knees and jumped right up to meet the energy blast, slicing through it like a pizza cutter would slice through pizza. Frieza's eyes widened when Saitama appeared before him. He hit Frieza with a right jab, but Frieza caught it with his own hand. He instantly regretted it, and let out a shout of pain as the force from Saitama's punch ran through his hand. Frieza grunted angrily and kicked Saitama in the chin. Saitama did nothing to block or dodge the kick, however, and flew up momentarily into the sky. Frieza then fired a series of I-beams at Saitama while he was midair and vulnerable. A cloud of black smoke appeared around Saitama and covered him from Frieza. Instantly, however, the cloud of smoke dissipated in the air, and Saitama threw a long-distance punch. The shockwaves from the punch were immense, acting like an invisible Kai blast that blew Frieza back. Frieza held his hands back and fired a stream of energy that ran counter to his own trajectory and stopped him midair just before he touched the ground. "I didn't know you could fly," shouted Saitama, "and with those energy beams, you kinda remind me of Burrows and that purple guy with the antennae." Frieza didn't even have to ask about the second person he mentioned, although the statement caught Frieza by surprise. Why would he say that? Wouldn't such simple feats as flying and energy waves be the norm for someone as strong as Saitama? "Wait, are you saying you can't fly or use energy?" "Nope," replied Saitama. "But then what was that invisible burst of pressure you just attacked me with?" "That was just my regular punch." Frieza let out a meep of fear and surprise. Did he just hear him correctly? That was the force of his regular punch, and when he wasn't even fighting seriously. Likewise, the other space pirates and the heroes watching the battle had their jaws opened. Did Raccoon get a screw knocked loose? Because Raccoon is pretty sure the Baldy said that was just his regular punch. "Jesus Christ," said Super Alloy Darkshine. "He must have the muscles of a god to pull something like that off." "So this is really the warrior we came here for," said Captain Ginyu. "No wonder Burrows, Nappa, and Vegeta were bested." "Well, that's just peaky," said an irate Frieza, "but guess what? You're not the only one who can play at that game." Frieza flew to Saitama and appeared just a few feet in front of him. Frieza cupped both of his hands again and fired an invisible ki. Saitama's eyes nominally widened as he was pushed back by Frieza's attack, briefly closing his eyes as well. But when Saitama opened his eyes, Frieza was gone. "Hey, where did you go?" Saitama looked around the landscape and saw nothing but rocks and dust. "Did you like camouflage or something? I mean, I know chameleons can change their skin. Are you like some mutated alien chameleon? 'Cause it would explain a lot about you." Frieza finally made his move, appearing behind Saitama and kicking him across the head with his right foot. Next came a knee to his gut, and finally a red energy sphere square in Saitama's face. Frieza grinned in delight, a direct hit at point-blank range, and he was just leaving himself wide open for any attack. What an idiot. That ought to have done some damage. He waited for the smoke to clear to see whether his hope rang true or not, and of course, Saitama just stood there like nothing happened. Grrrrrrhhhhh. Frieza gritted his teeth and was prepared to let out another shout of anger, but he didn't want to let Saitama get the best of him so soon into the battle, so he closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and calmly exhaled. "You all good there?" said Saitama. "Already need to catch your breath." "Just fine, thank you." Saitama floated up into the air and held both his arms and hands outstretched. He floated backwards until he gently placed his feet on a rock cliff about 10 feet above Saitama. "You're quite the gifted warrior. Besides my parents, I don't believe anyone has ever worked me to this level. Truth be told, I can barely contain my excitement." "Yeah, I'm trying my best not to look too excited either," said Saitama. "Just look at my face." Saitama pointed both hands at his face and widened his eyes. "I can see that. Well, I guess I'll just have to heat things up." Frieza lifted his right hand up into the air, and instantly, a series of rocks floated up in the sky. He lifted his other hand in sync with his other hand, and using both hands, twirled them in a circular motion, and began circling around him like an asteroid ring around a planet. Frieza extended his thumb, index finger, and middle finger, and one of the rocks was thrown at Saitama's face. Saitama didn't even lift a finger to stop the rock from hitting him in the face, but if the rock knew better, it would have known to get out of Saitama's way, for upon contact, the rock shattered and fell into dozens of tiny pieces. Frieza's smirk faded, and with both of his hands, he fired the rest of the rocks at Saitama, each rock striking Saitama at different angles. To his increased frustration, Saitama still stood there and still took no visible damage. "How come all any psychic wants to do is throw pebbles?" said Saitama. "It's a freaking waste." "Oh, are these rocks not up to your satisfactory level of size?" retorted Frieza. "I'm so sorry. Here, let's play a game to make things more fun for you." Frieza lifted both his hands with the palms face up. Suddenly, the ground began to violently shake, knocking the spectators off balance. Saitama raised his eyebrows in confusion. What was Frieza up to? Behind Frieza, an enormous rock began to rise, being ripped straight out of the ground. The size of this boulder was unbelievable, Even Tatsumaki herself couldn't help being shaken by its monumental size. "It looks like a floating island," said Puri prisoner. "He ripped it right out of the ground," said Genos in disbelief. "How can such a monster exist?" Likewise, the space pirates were letting out gasps of surprise and amazement. None of them had ever seen Frieza in his ultimate form, but the idea that their master could rip islands from the ground was unreal. "Amazing, Lord Frieza," shouted Captain Ginyu, "crush that earthling into a bloody pulp." "Oh, I intend to," said Frieza quietly. Saitama cracked a small smile. "Not bad. So what's this game called?" "Rock, paper, scissors." With a mighty thrust of his hands, the island-sized boulder came flying towards Saitama. Saitama bucked his hips and prepared to take the rock head-on. Except in my version, rock beats paper. The humongous rock prevented any of the spectators from seeing Saitama clearly once the boulder reached him. The other heroes felt stomach being tied in knots. Each of them nervously glanced at each other, all of them worrying if Saitama could handle an island being thrown at him. Bang and Genos, however, calmly smirked. "Frieza doesn't know what he's in for," said Bang. Frieza smiled confidently, assured in his victory. But like Bang said, Frieza didn't know what he was in for. A deep rumbling echoed through the sky, emanating from the boulder. Suddenly, the boulder fractured into two semicircles, landing on the ground with a thunderous crash. Before Frieza had the time to let out a gasp of shock, Saitama appeared in front of him, smirking with confidence. "I guess scissors cuts rock." Saitama slapped him across the face, sending him skyrocketing to the side. Frieza propelled himself back to an upright position and fired a barrage of death beams at Saitama. Saitama flicked them away with his hands as one would flick away flies. The death beams lit up the sky with bright purple flashes of light, destroying even more of the terrain. The force of the energy blasts coupled with the very intense energies of the two warriors caused the unconscious Super Saiyan to waken from his slumber. General Nappa was slow to get up. He felt all of his muscles were raw with pain and noticed dozens of wounds all over his chest. What happened? The memories of his unsavory defeat against that scumbag Frieza flashed back to him, and a surge of rage coursed through him in the process. That slimy reptile had actually managed to put him under like this. How humiliating. "I'm gonna," Nappa's sentence faltered when he saw Frieza floating in the sky, apparently looking at someone in front of him. Nappa turned to see who Frieza was looking at, and he gasped. It was Saitama. So that bald bastard actually made it. Figures. Frieza had no idea what he was in for. Saitama was unlike anything he'd ever seen, and pretty soon, Frieza'd figure that out too. "Well, since I'm all banged up, might as well watch the show." Frieza felt a sense of frustration, but he didn't let it put him down too much. The Emperor still had plenty of tricks up his sleeve. "Alright, how about we try this?" Frieza sped to Saitama until he was only a few meters separate from him. He extended his arms in front of him and put one hand on top of the other. As soon as he did, a bright orange ball appeared around Saitama. The bald hero felt a wave of pressure surrounding him, constricting his muscles. "What is this?" said Saitama. "It's paralysis. Another useful feature of my psychic abilities." "Nifty." Frieza lifted his hands up into the sky with the intention of sending Saitama flying upward. But Frieza felt an instant tug preventing him from lifting Saitama more than a few inches off the ground. "What?" Frieza tried again, but he still felt a great resistance pushing against him. "How the hell are you so heavy?" Frieza let out a very loud groan of frustration and exertion as he continued to try lifting Saitama off the ground. Saitama's eyes nominally widened in surprise when he saw himself slowly being lifted off the ground until he was hovering about 30 meters off the ground. "So this is what it feels like to fly," said Saitama. "It's pretty neat." Frieza felt like his insides were going to burst, until he could no longer take the stress and put Saitama off the ground, still being careful to keep the paralysis in effect. "Is this all your paralysis can do?" "Cuz." Saitama extended his arms out, and instantly, the bright orange ball around Saitama vanished. "Unbelievable." "Alright, I've let you have your fun and sit idly by," said Saitama, "but I've had enough waiting around. Now, oftentimes, I'd usually have already killed regular monsters, but this time I'ma do something a little different. I'm gonna draw this out for a little while since I've been waiting a few weeks for this, and I'm sure as hell not gonna end it with just a punch. Does that sound good to you?" "Very well. You should know, though, that I've been fighting you with only a fraction of my full power," said Frieza in an attempt to incite some fear in Saitama. But Saitama just smirked with confidence and replied, "That's what I like to hear. Now let's see." Saitama looked at the ground around him, as if he was searching for something. He ran about 10 to 20 meters northeast, but once he got there, he shook his head and ran toward another spot. Perplexed by this odd behavior, Frieza spoke out. "What are you doing exactly?" "Looking for a hole to dig, your friend." besides the one you've already dug for yourself. Saitama let out another chuckle. Nah, besides, everything around here is rock, no soil to dig. No, what I'm looking for is the right spot to do this. Saitama bent his knees and dug his fingers into the ground. Super move, serious table flip. To all of the spectators watching, in front of the S-class hero, a wall of black suddenly appeared. It took a few seconds to realize that what Saitama had done was flip the entire ground below Frieza and all of the accompanying debris from the previous battles up into the air. Like the other spectators, it too took Frieza a few moments to understand what had just happened. All around him, he saw blue sky and rocks flying up in the air. When the realization of what had happened came to him, his face hardened to a serious stone tablet, and he surveyed everything around him. "What a move," shouted Frieza. "You must be pretty steamed to flip the tables around like that. I guess all that time waiting for me ground your gears. I'm touched. I had to run across a continent, so yeah, I'm pretty pissed." Before Frieza had the time to turn around, he felt a foot kicking him in the back. Frieza's trajectory was stopped by several rocks. Hold on. At the speed he was going, Frieza should have hit the ground. How high were they? Frieza looked below him, and he couldn't believe it. None of the spectators were in sight. The only thing he saw was a little area of brown, which must have been the ground thousands of feet below. The shock quickly wore off, and Frieza focused his attention back to the matter at hand. He saw Saitama still hovering in the spot where he had hit him. Frieza bent his knees, and with all of his might, flew up and headbutted Saitama in the stomach. Saitama was sent crashing through many rocks just like Frieza had, although he gave no visible signs of pain. Frieza couldn't be so cavalier in this fight any longer. An erroneous move would most likely cost him his life. This realization infuriated him, but in a way, it also brought him some excitement. He decided a change of attack would be a good call, specifically his close-range combat. Frieza focused his energy and channeled it into his fists. "I'll have to play this smart." And to do that, he'd have to be mobile. So he proceeded to jump across the many different rocks, changing his angle to make it more difficult for Saitama to track. Frieza flew at blinding speeds and punched Saitama across the face. Saitama attempted to grab him, but he was moving too fast, and he was unable to get a firm grip on him. Saitama followed him through the air and struck him with a series of love taps. Frieza and Saitama exchanged a series of close-range blows midair, but to the human eye, all they would have seen was bursts of air and debris being further destroyed. After a few seconds, Saitama's love taps eventually overpowered Frieza. The Space Emperor realized this, and he released a burst of energy around him that blew Saitama back momentarily. Frieza performed a series of mid-air front flips and struck Saitama with his tail. He then wrapped his tail around Saitama and tightened his grip. "Are you giving out free neck massages?" said Saitama. Frieza snarled, and formed a small fireball in his palm and fired it at point-blank range. Smoke enveloped around Saitama, but Saitama jumped upward, unharmed whatsoever, and engaged in another close-range brawl with Frieza. Like before, Saitama's punches were but love taps. Fists collided, the air moistened with intensity, and the Space Emperor was yet again being overwhelmed. The power of Saitama's punches was beginning to take a significant toll on him. So early in the battle, but already he was having blurry vision and could see blood forming on several parts of his body. He truly felt death creeping up on him. Could this duel really be over in such a short amount of time? Could Frieza really die with this sort of shame? A great surge of fury and willpower rose up in Frieza. The lizard focused on maintaining focus, and the blurriness in his eyes instantly faded. He refused to be humiliated by an opponent such as this. He could not allow it. Why, A purple aura enveloped around Frieza, and the surrounding rubble was vaporized by the high-level energy barrier. Saitama instantly noticed Frieza's punches increase in speed and ferocity. His love taps were quickly being overwhelmed by Frieza's newly empowered punches. Saitama beamed in delight. Maybe he could break a sweat. Well, not with the power he was displaying now, but it was a start. "Not bad," said Saitama, "but not enough either. Normal punch combo." What? That was all that Frieza could say as his punches were instantaneously nullified by Saitama's punches, and he was sent hurtling toward the earth. He felt himself landing on the ground with a thud. He looked around and realized they had made it back to the ground. Zarbon and the remaining genius were looking on in distress, and from the sky, Saitama crashed down, sending several more rocks momentarily up into the sky. Frieza was panting like a dog in a hot summer afternoon. His body was covered with smudges and bruises, and his hands were throbbing. Frieza couldn't understand it. No matter what I hit him with or no matter how many times I hit him with my attacks, he doesn't feel a thing. It's as if his body is an impenetrable suit of armor that protects him from anything. Frieza looked at his hands and saw the dark smudges and slightly increased size from swelling. To think that a mere human could have such unbelievable amounts of strength, thought Frieza in his mind. I attacked him with 50% of my power, and he treated it like it was nothing. No one has ever pushed my body to this extremity before. Frieza looked up at his opponent, who, even after the earth-shaking battle underway, appeared as if he were on a regular Sunday stroll. His teeth were clenched in anger, and his fists were shaking in rage. Why, unbeknownst to any of the spectators on Earth, in a parallel dimension, the being known as God was observing the ensuing struggle with intense curiosity and burgeoning bafflement. God watched as fighter after fighter arrived and was easily disposed of by the Emperor of the Universe, and of course, when Saitama had arrived. God thought Frieza could handle himself against Saitama, but this belief was quickly proven wrong. Even with only a fraction of his power, Saitama was more than a match against Frieza at 50% power. With such a large power gap, I'm not sure how Frieza will reign supreme over Saitama. However, I have reason to hope. Even though I know little of Frieza's life, from what I've seen of this battle so far, Frieza's willpower is extremely formidable. Just like Saitama and just like Garu, I could sense Frieza's life force fading, but it instantly reappeared. And with it, Frieza managed to momentarily overwhelm Saitama's initial punches. His determination managed to prevail over the feeling of death. For this is the true key to surpassing one's limits, overcoming death. Only Saitama has managed to do this. And if an ordinary man such as him could do it, there should be no reason why a mutant prodigy such as Frieza shouldn't be able to. If Frieza can continue to surpass the sensation of death, gradually use more of his power and overcome Saitama's increased power, perhaps he could obtain an explosive growth of power like Saitama did. I can only hope. Back on the battlefield, Saitama's expression was still rather dull, but Frieza's anger felt like it was going to burst. "You're pretty strong," said Saitama blatantly. This comment alleviated some of Frieza's anger, and the pressure built up in his teeth and fists dialed down. I haven't felt this way since Burroughs. Likewise, no wonder Burroughs was defeated. But alas, the difference between him and I is you fought him at his maximum power. I've only fought you with about half of my true power. Join the club, blurted Saitama. That's me every day of my life. It's freaking boring as hell. This new revelation made a question pop up in Saitama's brain. Let me ask you something. If you're this powerful, how do you deal with it? Deal with what? The boredom? How do you cope knowing there's nobody who can give you the exhilaration of a real fight? Oh, getting personal are we? Said Frieza. Well, if you were here before, you would have seen I have the ability to undergo transformations that reduce my strength significantly. Lucky, but unlike you, I'm an opulent ruler who doesn't need to reduce himself to barbarous engagement to quell my tedium. Such trivial matters are beneath me. Now, if we might, I'd like to cease this heart-to-heart and do what I came here to do. Put you in the ground. Sounds good to me. But, Frieza looked at the barren wasteland all around him filled with piles of rocks and uneven ground spanning for miles around, and he shook his head in disapproval. If it's alright with you, I'd prefer to move to a place that isn't completely destroyed. Fine, fine. What do you suggest? Follow me. Frieza levitated off the ground and motioned Saitama to follow him up in the sky. Saitama bent his knees down and jumped up to accompany his opponent. The two of them were flying through the air, searching for a more optimal place to resume their legendary battle. The entire terrain was just barren rocklands devoid of any life. Just when Frieza was about to give up on finding a better spot, a new biome came into view. A field of lush green grass spanned for several miles. A crystal-clear lake glimmered in the morning sun, and a series of tall pine trees were spread across the land. We'll choose that as our next area of battle, shouted Frieza through the noisy wind. Got it, replied Saitama. The two fighters quickly descended to their new fighting ground. Once they reached the ground, both of them took a moment to survey the landscape and somewhat admire the lush greenery in comparison to the arid and sun-baked ground they just left. You know, I'm feeling like having a little fun, said Saitama, so how about this? I'll fight without using either of my hands. What a generous offer. Alright, I accept your terms. But I must warn you, Frieza smirked with his typical poise, the gloves are coming off this round. Oh, Frieza's smirk floundered when he saw Saitama proceed to pull his gloves off his hands. I didn't mean literally. Saitama snickered, catching Frieza off guard. I know, just messing with you. Frieza couldn't help but give a small smile of amusement as a response. Well played. Now then. A purple aura encased itself around Frieza, and his muscles tightened as he felt the power surging through him. Let the real fight begin. Frieza was the first to initiate the second round. The Space Emperor launched a flurry of punches, but Saitama nonchalantly avoided all of his strikes. Frieza then swept Saitama's feet from under him, but Saitama jumped up. Frieza followed suit and released several more kicks and punches. The S-class hero continued to evade his strikes, occasionally blocking Frieza's kicks with his own legs or with his shoulders. Frieza then continued to attack, this time with his tail, whipping it in the air and creating mild shockwaves in the process. To his endless frustration, Saitama's speed outpaced Frieza's attacks. Frieza launched Saitama back with a ball of purple energy. A rapid barrage of purple energy blasts followed suit, and in mere seconds, the sky was illuminated with purple light. Saitama was floating in the air, taking the full force of the multitudinous energy waves like they were nothing. Frieza appeared mere inches in front of him and struck him hard across the face with a right hook. Frieza continued with these hook fists, relentlessly pummeling Saitama's face like it was a punching bag, using his rage as fuel for his punches. "That's gonna leave a mark," said Frieza. "Yay, on your fists." Saitama head-butted Frieza in the forehead, eliciting a large shout of pain. He then performed a side kick in Frieza's abdomen, sending him dashing through the air, and as a follow-up strike, Saitama kicked Frieza in the small of his back with his heel. Frieza crashed into the ground, but he immediately flew back up, with a purple aura flaring up around him, and struck Saitama with an orb of energy. But this time, Saitama grabbed the orb in Frieza's hand and crushed it in the palm of his hand. Not this time. The two then proceeded to punch and kick each other, all the while descending down from the sky. Frieza took defensive counter-maneuvers and blocked Saitama's kicks with his elbows and fists. Frieza groaned in frustration and thrusted Saitama back several dozen meters with an invisible ki. Frieza then placed his middle finger and index finger together and gathered a surge of energy into his fingertips. A bright purple ball of energy the size of an apple appeared at his fingertips. Death Wave. Frieza swung the energy sphere around, creating a large death beam in the form of a giant, razor-sharp energy blade heading straight for Saitama. Alas, the bald hero would not be deterred. While still hovering in the sky, Saitama waited for the death wave, and did perhaps the most bizarre thing possible. He bit it. What the fuck? Those were the only words that came out of Frieza's mouth as he watched the utterly outlandish defense Saitama was using against his death wave. His death wave, a technique that could perhaps slice an entire moon in half, was being stopped by teeth. How idiotic. Saitama clamped his teeth as hard as he could onto this death wave. There were purple sparks flying from Saitama's mouth, and for a moment, the hero struggled against the energy wave, being pushed back into the ground. The inside of his mouth was actually starting to heat up as the friction and kinetic energy intensified and made his mouth into a sauna. Maybe this wasn't the best idea, thought Saitama. As the seconds passed, the intensity of the death wave increased, becoming more unstable, and expelling more bolts of energy and electricity. At the current rate, the death wave would slice the top of the hero's head off, although the only thing the death wave would slice that day was its dreams of killing Saitama. This, Saitama spoke with muzzled speech, is nothing. Saitama grabbed the death wave with both of his hands and dug his heels into the ground. With a burst of strength, Saitama split the energy razor into 3 pieces. He tossed 2 of the pieces, where they then exploded, and the third piece he spit out of his mouth, burning the grass below him into charred ashes. Saitama rubbed his front teeth with his hand, trying to see if there were any stains or anything of that nature. Thank God, there weren't, but goddamn, that attack had packed more punch than he expected. "Bite me, dickless," shouted Saitama. "Sorry, I don't take small bites," replied Frieza. "So did you enjoy your little chowdown? I thought you said you weren't going to use your hands." "Yeah, well now that I felt your power, I figure I'll need to use my hands to beat you. To tell you the truth, it's actually got me pretty pumped." "I'm sure it does. But it's too bad I didn't take a little off the top there just now." "Oh wait, there's nothing to take off." Saitama's face scrunched in anger, but he calmed himself down and evilly smirked. "Oh, I'm going to enjoy this." Saitama kicked the ground, causing several boulders to fly a few feet into the sky. Saitama kicked the boulders one by one at blinding speeds, creating shockwaves in the process. Frieza smoothly dodged all of the boulders, and for the last boulder, he captured it with his hand, making sure to move his hand back to decrease the acceleration and minimize damage to his hand. "Right back at you." The Space Emperor tossed the large boulder back at Saitama, and the bald hero broke the boulder with his fist into millions of shards that shot out in all directions. Frieza flew down to Saitama, striking him with another series of close-range punches. The two warriors constantly disappeared and reappeared from visible sight, leveling the ground below them, tearing up grass, releasing tremors into the ground. Frieza put his elbows crossed together and struck Saitama in the chest, sending the two of them diving into the water. A huge wave of water splashed up dozens of meters into the sky, creating waves that were several feet in height. The two were diving deeper and deeper into the lake, with Frieza striking a repeated, anger-driven flurry of punches at Saitama's chest. Once Frieza landed his last punch, his eyes began to glow a bright purple, and his eye beams struck Saitama, sending him all the way down to the bottom depths of the profoundly deep lake. Saitama composedly shook off the damage and got himself back on his feet. He took note of the depths he had traveled down, opaque darkness surrounding him on all sides. His superhuman senses allowed him to more accurately observe in darker surroundings, although it was still nonetheless difficult. Saitama noticed a form coming into view. Frieza was calmly floating down to the bottom, with his arms crossed and a smirk splitting his face. From the palm of his hand, a very bright white ball of energy grew to about the size of a boulder, allowing for the fighters to properly see in this black setting. Small fish and other organisms scurried away at the sight of this sudden flash of light. The two warriors remained motionless, staring at each other in a silent pause. What the two fighters didn't know was that at the moment, they were swimming in Lake Abyssus, the deepest freshwater source on the planet. Both were currently about 10 feet underwater. At that level, any human would have already been crushed by the colossal water pressure from the immense weight of the water piled above them. But for warriors of such caliber as these, the most this would give them was a little crick in their backs. The silence continued on for about half a minute. It was as if this was a competition, seeing which one would break and reach the surface for air. Damn, he's not giving in, thought Saitama. Impressive resistance. My race possesses the ability to survive in the vacuum of space, and this is not much different. Frieza's smile widened. But let's see how long he can keep this up. The seconds passed. Both had reached the minute mark. How long was this going to on? Then it came. Saitama began to impatiently tap his finger on his shoulder. Next, his left foot began tapping on the ground. Saitama's neutral expression was slowly beginning to fade, and his face began to turn a bright hue of red. Frieza let out an imperceptible laugh. He was running on fumes. Saitama pretended to act as if nothing was happening, and stared at Frieza with a confident stare. There was no way he was letting this smug bastard get the better of him. This prideful mantra was quickly beginning to wane, being replaced by the feeling of having the air sucked out of his lungs like a vacuum cleaner. Damn it. No longer being able to take the lack of air, Saitama bent his knees down and performed his serious jump. Saitama's form was but a momentary blur as he dashed up through the water. The ground beneath Frieza's feet quaked, causing him to lose his balance. 10 feet above Frieza, the bald hero was desperately gasping for air, taking deep breaths and coughing up water he choked on. Once Saitama's breathing leveled out, he realized how high he had jumped, even though he was under thousands of feet of water. Saitama began his descent, but when he was merely a few feet from crashing into the water, the lake suddenly split into two. At first, Saitama didn't understand what was happening, but then he realized it must have been Frieza using his psychic powers again. When Saitama looked down, all he could see was the same giant ball of energy Frieza conjured up before. Frieza wasn't anywhere in sight. Where did he go? Right here, ass face. Huh? Turned out Frieza was right above him. He felt his elbow slam his back, increasing the velocity of their descent several fold. It took about 8 seconds for them to reach the bottom of ground. As a follow-up, he grabbed Saitama's cape and began swinging him at amazing speeds. This feeling reminded Saitama of his serious spin he used against Nappa, although Frieza's spinning wasn't quite as fast. Good times, good times. Once he felt he had gained enough speed, Frieza sent him soaring back up to the sky. For the final touch, Frieza sped up behind him and fired a red energy blast. The force of the blast was intense. The blast spanned several feet in width and enveloped several hundred meters of land below them, scorching everything in its path. The energy wave sent Saitama barreling toward the ground. The Emperor's confidence rose after his combo attack. Frieza flew down to the ground until he was a few feet away from Saitama's motionless body. It took a few seconds for the bald hero to change his position, but when he did move, it was very brisk and fluid, showing the relatively little damage he received. The repeated sense of frustration rose up in Frieza, but he chose not to hold on to it or fester inside and just let it go. Not a bad move, man, said Saitama, stretching his arms into the air and rotating his back as if he had just finished an exercise. You really area tough one, aren't you? Naturally. Oh, I forgot. Saitama lunged at Frieza and, holding back a significant portion of his power, punched the slimy lizard in the stomach. Don't call me ass face. A sonic boom was created from the force of the punch, and Frieza's form instantly became an indistinguishable blur flying through the sky. Saitama jumped forward and followed up his attack. consecutive normal punches. Saitama launched a series of quick right-handed punches, to which Frieza blocked or dodged, still being rather careful with his movements. As the two of them exchanged blows, they found themselves entering the nearby forest for their next battleground. Saitama and Frieza were either running or flying across the tops of the trees. Saitama was using the branches to propel himself through the air, whilst Frieza was merely soaring through the air. The two fighters proceeded to strike each other with long-distance attacks. Saitama used the force of his punches as his own personal energy attacks, and Frieza fired a rapid barrage of death beams. Trees were mowed down, the colliding strikes acting as razor-sharp axes chopping everything around them. Saitama stopped himself on one of the trees and ripped a nearby tree right out of the ground. He swung it around and slammed Frieza with it. The tiny lizard caught it with one hand, and with his other free hand, ripped an adjacent tree just as Saitama had, and with the trunk of the tree, jabbed Saitama in the chest. Frieza split the tree in half with a sharp kai slice, and for the final touch, launched a death cannon. Saitama actually felt a little fuse blow off in his head. "Alright, you asked for this," shouted Saitama. The bald hero balanced himself on one of the thicker branches of the trees and bent his knees. Frieza didn't like this. What's he doing? Saitama took a deep breath in and out. Killer move, serious chops. Frieza's eyes bulged out of his eyes. If it weren't for his advanced speed and reflexes, he wouldn't have had enough time both add a barrier of psychic energy around himself and cross his arms in front of him to defend himself. Hundreds of trees were uprooted from their spots. Small animals such as squirrels, birds, frogs, and other creatures were sent flying into the sky, crushed by the trees and other large debris. Frieza powered up and allowed his energy to burst in a large purple vortex, resisting the monumental current flowing against him. Then, at the tip of Frieza's fingertips, two more small orbs of energy were being formed. Death Razors. Frieza released his death waves together to form a very large X-shaped energy attack. The purple death razors instantly clashed against Saitama's serious chops. Intense sparks were flying at the center, lighting some of the trees on fire. In a spontaneous burst, the energy from these two moves exploded, producing a bright flash of light that blinded both fighters. When visibility was regained, the two warriors saw that yet again, the landscape was leveled. Hundreds, no, thousands, of trees were vaporized, with the grass charred beyond recognition, creating another vast wasteland. Neither warrior made a move. Both were quietly looking at one another, their faces showing no signs of expression whatsoever. Just blank staring. Then, the first movement, the bald hero lifted his right foot and started a regular pace toward his opponent. Once Frieza noticed his opponent moving, the Emperor followed by example and serenely walked to meet up with Saitama. When they ceased their walking, they were but a few feet apart from each other. Still, neither of them said a word. Both were digesting the events of the battle, pondering their opponent's thoughts, and curious about what direction the battle would take from his point on. "Congrats," said Saitama, effectively breaking the silence that had built up. "You're officially the first guy I've faced who's ever survived one of my serious series attacks." "Likewise," replied Frieza, "nobody has ever pushed me to this extremity before. Not even my parents have fought me at such a high degree. It really would be such a waste to kill you, so I'll give you a rare second chance. Join me, and I'll make you Supreme Commander of the Frieza Force. You'll get to handpick one of the 400 planets I currently own. Either way, you'll still be on my property. So what do you say?" Saitama wagged his finger and made condescending clicking noises with his tongue. "Sorry, no sale, Charlie." "Well, since I'm on your land, might as well get into character." Saitama put his hands on his knees and bent down until his head was at Frieza's waist. He then held his middle finger out to Frieza. "Squatter lives matter." Frieza let out an amused chuckle. "Well, don't say I didn't warn you. Sadly, only one outcome remains for you then, you're deaf." "Oh really? How do you figure?" "Don't think your little tricks can fool me. You'd like me to believe you're lashing out at me full steam, but you and I both know we haven't seen the limits of your strength just yet." Gasp! Saitama rose up off the ground and clapped his hands against his cheeks, looking like Kevin McAllister in the classic Home Alone movie. Who would have thought? We literally just went over this like 10 minutes ago. God, with you, it just goes in one ear or out the other, or whatever you call those holes in your head. Oh, I didn't forget. I just know that it's a bluff. I can't imagine your power level to be on 100 million, and I still have ample energy to spare. Oh ho ho, are you calling me out? Frieza crossed his arms. Prove me wrong. Prove you wrong. I thought you'd never ask. Saitama turned away from Frieza and took a few paces backwards, pausing after the 10th step and briskly twirled around 180 degrees. You know, I've seen some pretty cocky monsters, but your arrogance takes the cake. I'm gonna enjoy beating that smug grin off your face. Well, Frieza arched his back forward ever so slightly, extended his hands out downward, and nominally bowed his head down. I'll enjoy seeing you try. Alright, Saitama cracked his knuckles to sound more badass, but don't say I didn't warn you. Neither one made a move. The cold wind whipped across their faces. The other heroes had traveled a considerable distance from their original spots to get a better view of the battlefield. At that moment, all of the spectators were perched on a high ledge that was about 1,000 to 1,500 meters away from Saitama and Frieza's positions, due to the injuries they had sustained. It took them considerably longer than expected, so they didn't get a chance to see any of the battle that caused all of the destruction. But it was quite obvious that they were responsible for all of the damage that had been done to this land. They were astonished with the level of devastation present before them. They were quite powerful indeed. What are they doing just standing there? Said Sweet Mask. Neither one of them is making a move. They're both waiting for the right moment to make their next move. Everyone heads turned to the speaker, Garu. Garu clenched his heart and noticed goosebumps all over his skin. His body was sending out a huge red flag, even from such a far distance, that it was almost hard to believe it was even real. Even from here, the pressure of their combined power is almost more than I can bear. That's no lie, said Atomic Samurai, several hundred meters away. The Saiyan general was quietly observing the battle as well, in awe of the power both warriors had displayed thus far. Even with his new power, Nappa couldn't register a hint of their movements. Saitama hadn't fought Nappa anywhere near the level of power he was showing at the moment. Saitama, you're just full of surprises. For several seconds, the battlefield was silent. The atmosphere of apprehension and power enveloped around both combatants, and both were quietly waiting to see who would act first and heighten the tension of this setting. It was Saitama who finally made the move. His eyes widened ever so slightly, his body leaning forward just a few centimeters. Frieza let out a gasp of shock. With blitzing speed, Saitama nailed Frieza in the chest with his elbow. The Space Emperor was sent back several meters, the force of the blow temporarily knocking his senses out of whack, which made him unprepared for the uppercut to his jaw. Frieza hurtled up into the sky, plopping back down to the earth with a hard thud. Once his senses came back to him, he felt a huge sense of pain surging throughout his entire body. For a moment, he lost his balance and fell back to the ground. He struggled to regain his footing. Drool began to dribble out of his mouth, and he could feel a liquid running down his nose. It didn't take a genius to figure out that it was his blood. But how? 2 blows. There's no way I should have taken this much damage. It's impossible. Once again, the blurriness began to cloud his eyes, but this time, Frieza was beginning to lose feeling in his arms as well. He could see the blood from his nose drip down on the ground, and the blood from his other wounds were also dripping as well. In fact, it was taking all his focus not to fall onto the ground and clutch his chest, but he had to maintain the illusion that the damage wasn't so horribly severe. God was growing more and more concerned. Frieza, you must not be defeated by this worm. Stand up and fight. Do not allow the cold embrace of death to overtake you. The entire dimension trembled as God's frustration soared. Fight, Saitama snidely snickered in response. Seeing the way Frieza was freaking out after all of the big shit he was talking was actually pretty fulfilling. Frieza took note of the amusement Saitama had with this, and he felt a nerve strike inside him, so Frieza lunged at Saitama. His purple aura was burning even brighter, being fueled by his unmitigated wrath, to which Saitama blocked with his own arms. The force built up from the blows was so powerful, it created sharp bursts of air all around them and managed to crack the ground below them. Frieza swung his body around and struck Saitama with a series of tail attacks. Alas, Saitama grabbed the Space Emperor's tail and slammed him into the ground. He lifted Frieza up and did the same maneuver about 5 times until Frieza broke free of his grip and fired a death cannon. Saitama caught the death cannon with his hand and crushed it into nothingness. Frieza lifted his hand palm up, and on the ground, several stones were carved out of the ground. He then formed his hand into a fist, causing the multiple stone bricks to be cut away until they were large daggers. Finally, he thrust his hand forward, sending all of the sharp daggers flying towards Saitama. The bald hero kicked the ground, creating a giant wall of stone that blocked all of the daggers. Then, Saitama performed a side kick, sending the giant stone wall flying at tremendous speeds. Frieza was unprepared for a counterattack as such, so he was forced to take the full brunt of the stone wall. After a few seconds of flying through the air, Frieza's back collided against a rock canyon. The impact destroyed the small rock canyon and buried the Space Emperor under a pile of rubble. In seconds, the entire pile of rubble was vaporized by a bright purple release of energy. Saitama sprinted up and lobbed Frieza in the gut before the Space Emperor had the chance to attack again. The Emperor of the Universe was being absolutely pummeled. No matter what he did, Saitama was able to counter or dodge it as if it were child's play. Frieza was floating in the air, furiously trying to search for Saitama's position, when Saitama kicked him in the back. Frieza rotated to strike back at Saitama, but Saitama struck him with a volley of short jabs. His punches were so fast, the only thing he could see was a giant mass of red covering Saitama's upper body. Frieza was sent crashing into the ground, but using his telekinesis, he stopped himself just before he reached the ground. Frieza soared up into the air and fired a death beam. Frieza's eyes widened at what he saw. Saitama dodged it at such amazing speed. Frieza could barely even tell he moved at all. To the regular eye, it would have appeared as if the energy beam had gone straight through Saitama's body. "That's not possible," shouted Frieza. "No one can move that quickly. Dude, you have no idea what's possible." The way Saitama spoke wasn't so much condescending, but rather, it was a more knowledgeable tone of voice. The way he spoke sounded as if he was a teacher and Frieza was the student. Frieza picked up on this, eliciting a grunt of anger from the lizard. "Silence. Don't speak to me like I am a fool. I am the ruler of the universe. It is the fate given to me by destiny. My power, my wealth, my social status, they are all part of my grandeur. I control everything and anyone who crosses my path. The likes of you are only meant to grovel at my feet like the worm you are." Saitama's smirk faded, and his expression was now very serious. "You're living under a delusion," Frieza snarled. "What are you talking about? You're so convinced of your grandeur, so convinced that the power you have is enough to beat anyone who stands in your way, that you don't even bother to train, to better your abilities. Let me ask you something. Have you ever trained a day in your life? I trained with my father as a child, but other than that, no, such a thing is beneath me." "Beneath you?" Saitama let out a laugh of derisiveness. "If that's what you think, then you're a bigger idiot than I thought. You think I was born with this power?" Saitama extended his hands and pointed his fingers to himself. "Of course not. Neither are any of the heroes that you fought. Do you want to know how I got this strong? Fine, humor me. I trained like absolute hell for the last 3 years. Every single day, I would push my body beyond its limits. I'd keep on fighting, no matter how painful, how torturous, how unbearable it got. Even when I was coughing up blood, when I thought my whole body was on fire, that I'd just collapse dead on the ground from exhaustion, I always kept going. And do you know why I put myself through that living hell?" Frieza passively shrugged his shoulders. Saitama's lips curled into a sly smile. "So I could take care of self-righteous pricks like you." A chorus of chuckles emanated from Frieza. "Take care of me, you say?" The corners of the lizard's mouth pointed downward, and his entire body began to tremble with rage. "I'd like to see you try." Frieza sprung for his opponent, refusing to let this infuriating man get the better of him. Alas, it was still not enough to deter Saitama. The hero smoothly dodged Frieza's attack and managed to grab his wrist. Using his momentum, Saitama threw Frieza into the ground yet again and kicked him in the jaw. Suddenly, Frieza felt 5 fingers firmly clasp his head. "This isn't good." "Nope." Saitama slammed Frieza head first into the ground. He then dragged Frieza across the ground like a plow would dig across soil. The Space Emperor attempted to release himself from Saitama's grip, but Saitama's grip was like catchin'. The pain was unbearable. It felt like nails were being hammered into his face. It wasn't the rocks that were the problem, but the speed with which Saitama was dragging him and the grip he had made this unbearable. He continued yanking him on the ground until they made it to a canyon about 30 meters tall. Saitama pulled Frieza all the way up to the top of the canyon until there was a straight line sawing the canyon in half. "I think that's enough of that." Having had enough fun with the lizard, Saitama released Frieza from his grip and sent him flying several meters into the air. Saitama threw a powerful punch in the air. The force of the punch created powerful gusts of wind that blew Frieza even further up into the air. Saitama noticed Frieza's motionless body hovering in the air. "I might have pushed it a little too far there," said Frieza. Indeed, that seemed to be the case, as he began a downward descent without even bothering to stop himself. He couldn't. The force of Saitama's little fun drag had been a bit too much for the tiny lizard. With a loud thud, the Emperor of the Universe plummeted to the earth, spewing up dust and cracking the rock below him. "You alright?" Frieza's didn't move a muscle. Saitama jumped up several dozen meters into the air and landed about 10 feet away from Frieza. "Yoo-hoo!" Saitama snapped his fingers to get Frieza's attention. You still with me? Or are you already dead? And all I'm doing is just talking to myself. Once Saitama finished speaking, a finger twitched. Frieza's legs soon followed suit, and he gradually began to push himself back on his feet. Enough. Frieza's gaze was facing the ground. But Saitama didn't have to look into his eyes to know he was beyond furious. Suddenly, a tremor began to shake the earth. The tremor soon began to increase in power, threatening to knock Saitama and even the spectating heroes off balance. Then, surrounding debris began to levitate off of the ground several meters into the air. I have had enough of this mockery. His aura burst around him in a bright purple burst. Frieza soared up several hundred meters into the sky. Then, he held his index finger out. Zarbon and Captain Ginyu let out a gasp of terror. They were all too familiar with what was to come. Both were in utter shock. Is he really? Yes, he is, shouted Captain Ginyu. His most powerful attack, the supernova. Frieza's malicious laughter rang out through the air. Saitama shifted in tension. What was Frieza up to? At the tip of Frieza's finger, a small bright orb of energy came to life. The orb expanded exponentially by the second, until the small sphere became a colossal orb of energy that one could mistaken for a miniature sun. The heroes bucked in terror. What is that thing? It looks like a sun. How powerful can this demon be? Frieza smiled maniacally, brimming with delight. You're powerful, but let's see how you handle this power capable of obliterating an entire planet. Dodge it, and you'll die along with your precious planet. No, the heroes were petrified. How could any human hope of standing up to an attack like that? It was impossible. No, Lord Frieza will all be killed, screamed Zarbon. But the Emperor of the Universe would not be deterred, not in the slightest. Disappear. Frieza threw his finger across the air and sent the supernova hurtling towards the planet. The fiery orb of death sizzled with heat as it arrived closer to the ground. The terrain began to melt, even before it touched the earth, only further demonstrating the grandiose might of Frieza's most powerful attack. Saitama's eyes were covered in darkness, and his hands were tightly clenched into fists, but his face remained neutral and composed. Well, I did this once, I'll do it again. Killer move. Serious series, serious punch. The bald hero unleashed one of his more devastating strikes, punching the supernova with his raw power. The contact created a giant sonic boom that shook the earth around them, toppled over remaining trees, and created tidal waves about 10 meters in height. The power from Saitama's punch managed to dissipate the supernova, rupturing it into millions of tiny little wisps of light that flickered like fireflies. Lord Frieza felt his jaw drop to the ground, his mouth spewing out incoherent stutters as his only response to what he just witnessed. Zarbon and the Jinyus yelped in horror. Lord Frieza, shouted Zarbon, this can't possibly be. How can an earthling possess the power to match Frieza's ultimate form? Said Captain Ginyu in utter terror. It's unreal. Recoome needs to take a breather. 'Cause Recoome's panicking. The other spectators, however, were passionately cheering, amazed and baffled by the edge Saitama had over Frieza. The prophesied god-level threat that would bring humanity to its death was being single-handedly taken care of by the hero swindler. And he didn't even seem like he was putting all of his effort. It was unbelievable. His strength is otherworldly, said Bomb. What kind of iron did he pump to get those muscles? Said Superalloy Darkshine. Saitama's victory is secured, stated Atomic Samurai. Of course it is. The teenage cyborg became the center of attention, and all of the fighters turned their attention toward him. I was a fool to doubt my master's abilities. His strength is beyond what anyone can ever hope to achieve. He is the sole protector of humanity, and I am proud to be his disciple. Up in the sky, Frieza was at a loss for words. His eyebrows were scrunched in fear and disbelief. His shoulders were slumped down, and he felt the feeling in his fingers and toes disappear. Wah-wah-wh-ha. It's done. Frieza's shocked face turned into frustration when he heard Saitama yelling. The Emperor bared his teeth and grunted angrily. What are you talking about, you simpleton? If that was the best you can do, then it's already over. Truth be told, I've barely been fighting you half seriously. You definitely put up a good fight. And you're one of the only guys I've ever had to actually put some minor effort against. But it's done. Judging by the look on your face, I'd say I'm right. Up in the sky, Zarbon's eyebrows lifted in worry. God, could he be right? Is this really the end of the road for Lord Frieza? Don't be ridiculous, Zarbon, retorted Captain Ginyu. Our master can never be defeated. He is the supreme being of the universe. Nothing can stand against him. Sadly, Captain Ginyu spoke these words half-heartedly, for never in his life had he seen his master pushed to his limit before. As much as he detested to admit this, he actually didn't know who would win. The Emperor of the Universe was seething with rage, turmoil, and hatred. Although he did his best not to show it, He was on the verge of death. The blows from Saitama's special combo moves had taken their toll, and he barely had the energy to move his limbs. The Emperor felt so close to death's doors, and death was waiting for him to ring the doorbell. Veins were popping out of his forehead and his fingers were jabbing so deep into his skin. His palms began to fill with his crimson blood. All the while, his mind was racing. What an utter disgrace. To think that I could be so easily toyed with by a half-breed human from a backwater mudball. And to make it worse, my elite soldiers are viewing me in such a defeated state. This is a nightmare. Yes, that's the only way to explain this. How else could this happen? This entire conversation was echoing in his head. NOOO. Frieza's tail slammed viciously against the ground. I will not let this stand. My might is unrivaled across the universe. Your power is but a mere speck compared to mine. Saitama remained calm and composed. Once again, deluding yourself. You want to conquer and subjugate everyone under you, to make everyone's life a nightmare except for you and anyone under your rule. There's no way I'd ever let somebody like you beat me and take over this planet. Silence. Frieza sliced his hand across the air. Have you forgotten who you're up against? You will rue the day you crossed me. A bright white aura with a hint of light blue enveloped Frieza. You believe that this is the zenith of my grandiose strength. How ludicrous. As a gift for your impudent resistance, I will give you something no one has ever had the privilege to witness. Prepare to witness a nightmare beyond the horrors of hell. The Emperor of the Universe at 100% of his immeasurable, incomprehensible power. Yes, Saitama grinned in delight. This was what he had been waiting for so long. That's what I like to hear. Take all the time you need. I want to fight you at your very best. A small round of chuckles was given as a response. Excited, are we? Well then, don't say I didn't warn you. The atmosphere grew heavier, and the wind whipped in anticipation for what was to come. Once again, the ground quaked around everyone, except this time, it was 10 times more forceful than any other quakes before. The force was so powerful, the vibrations expanded further outward, spanning out from miles on end, managing to even knock people off their feet in a city and B-city. All of the spectators looked up in the sky, and realized that a series of dark gray clouds were swirling in the sky, hovering above Frieza. Everyone's hearts constricted and their lines pursed downward at this sight. Saitama, Atomic Samurai, cupped his hands around his mouth and shouted out to the bald hero on the battlefield. This is your chance. You can finish the job before he can achieve maximum power. Nope, not gonna happen. The samurai let out a stutter. Did he just hear him correctly? Saitama, the next to shout out to the hero, was Bang. This monster is unlike anything we've ever faced before. Each of his power-ups has unleashed devastating consequences. We have no idea what's going to happen if he reaches 100%. Master, I regret saying this, but they are correct. Saitama's disciple shouted out to his master, surprising both Saitama and himself, since he never contradicted his master on absolutely anything. He is too dangerous, and this while you still have the chance. Saitama didn't even lift a finger. The heroes exchanged looks of confusion and incomprehension. What the hell was Saitama doing? Instantaneously, a bolt of lightning came down from the sky and Frieza, but somehow, instead of damaging Frieza, it actually served to bulk up the muscles in his body. That wasn't a good sign. Dude, don't be a freaking idiot. It was Metal Bat who spoke up this time. Are you seriously just gonna sit there and let him buff up like that? This isn't a smart move, yelled Garu. Letting your opponent get the advantage like this can only end badly. Are you mental? Shouted Tatsumaki. Look, I get being overconfident now and then, but this is pushing it. This is crazy. Enough. All of the spectators were shunned silent when they heard this forceful command from Saitama, whose stoic face was replaced with frustration and aggravation. None of you understand. Ever since I've obtained this power, it's like a black hole has formed inside my heart, sucking out all my emotions and leaving only a hollow shell of my former self. You have no idea how long I've waited for an opportunity like this, for the chance to feel the exhilaration of a real fight. And not you or anybody else is gonna stop me. Nobody could give a proper response. They were too shocked and rather perturbed that Saitama would risk this kind of danger merely for his own selfish gains. Even Genos was taken aback by his master's brazen and reckless attitude. It was a side of him he had never seen before. Either way, I'm still gonna kick this guy's ass. Saitama's thunderous voice toned down to a regular speaking voice. There's no way in hell I'd lose to a monster. Not now, not ever again. Everyone had no understanding of Saitama's motives and newfound stubbornness to see Frieza at 100%. Well, everyone except the Saiyan general spectating the fight from afar. To Nappa, it made perfect sense. This was the fiery spirit of a warrior showing itself. The intense willpower and hunger for battle had taken over. If Nappa was in Saitama's situation, he'd be doing the exact same thing. And besides, Nappa had no doubt who would be the victor. Saitama. Defeat this bastard and avenge all the Saiyans slaughtered by his hands. Whispered Nappa, do it for me. I won't have it any other way. Lightning stirred in the vortex of clouds. Cobbles were floating several feet in the air, and the sky itself was trembling in the wake of the Space Emperor's power. Frieza could feel it within him. The final restraints of power were being removed. The colossal energy locked away was now flowing throughout his body, giving him strength he had never once imagined would ever need. Thoughts were running rampant in his brain. Bastard, to think he could push me to the brink like this. It's inconceivable. It's unbelievable. No, it's absolutely unacceptable. The bald hero was standing motionless, his eyes appearing like piercing daggers, yet his lips curved up into a smile. He's taking joy in this. I will not allow it. My empire has no bounds and will not be stopped by some bald, daft dotard like this. His voice was blasting within his mind, audible to no one but himself. My name is Lord Frieza. I have attained strength unparalleled throughout the cosmos. I am the Emperor of the universe, and all who come under my rule will come to accept it and kneel before my will. That is why I will not lose here. Something was happening. Inside the dark, ruthless heart of the Space Emperor, a spark ignited. That spark soon became a raging inferno, consuming Frieza from within. It was something Frieza had never once experienced in his life. He felt as if his spirit was shifting, becoming engrossed in this flame. Everyone gasped. In an instant, Frieza's blue aura changed into an obsidian black mass of energy. Black electricity sparked to life around the lizard. And simultaneously, the energy around Frieza began to warp, increasing in size and ferocity. All of the spectators looked on with worried faces. Something wasn't right. Even Saitama himself felt a change in the atmosphere, as if something sinister had just been unleashed. Frieza released a hair-raising, horrific, nightmarish, ear-piercing screech that destroyed all of the rock floor around him and pushed Saitama back a few feet, as well as the other onlookers. What the fuck is happening? Screamed Garou. I don't know, shouted Metal Bat, but whatever it is, it's intense. All across Frieza, the veins in his body began to turn crimson red. First was at his heart, but soon, this change began to expand through his body in all directions, until every vein in the lizard was now pitch black. Next, an explosion of red came forth, combining with the pitch-dark aura to form a swirling vortex of overwhelming force. Next, the purple center became onyx. Just as with the veins, this onyx color spread like a virus, until every inch of Frieza's body was covered in this black color. The final change was perhaps the most horrific. Spikes began to protrude out of the several spots of the lizard's body. First, at the tip of his elbows, 2 spikes about 1.5 inches in length splintered out, slightly curving at the tip. On the sides of his head, 2 black horns popped out. With the final depths of his transformation complete, out came forth an insanely bright burst of light. The intensity of this was so bright, not only was the entire landscape covered in this light, but the entire northern hemisphere of the planet lit up. From the outskirts of the planet's atmosphere, it seemed that the top half of the planet was completely white. After a few seconds, the intensity of the light began to wane, and visibility was restored, although what would be revealed was perhaps an even worse fate in and of itself. The bystanders recovered from the blinding flash and slowly uncovered their eyes to see what had transpired. On the battlefield, Saitama's happy grin had disappeared, and his serious expression now showed itself. The hero's heart was pounding, goosebumps were crawling all over his skin, and a chill ran down his back. Something huge has come. The understatement of the century. The Emperor of the universe was encased in a flowing swirl of red and black aura, acting like an intense fire. Frieza's pupils were now blood red, and his skin was jet black. Frieza was showing his pearly whites, which for some odd reason were the only things not either black or red, and his hands were calmly at his sides. His frame was much more muscular. Saitama could see the defining lines of muscle and the added height acquired from his new power-up. The tip of his tail had become bald with several spikes encased around it. The transformation served him better as a being of his standing in the universe's pecking order. For a few moments, there was nothing. The intensity of the moment was simply too much to overcome. After what appeared to be an eternity, the Emperor of the universe uttered 3 words. You're in for it now. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 8. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.